The galaxy burned for 7 years, and in that conflagration, the fundamental flaws of the Great Crusade's military doctrine became devastatingly apparent. When Warmaster Horus turned his weapons upon the Imperium he had helped forge, he commanded not merely a rebellion but a force structure so vast and unified that it nearly brought 10,000 years of human progress to ruin. The 16th Legion alone numbered over 130,000 Astartes at the war's outbreak, while other traitor legions like the Word Bearers had swollen to even more grotesque proportions, with some estimates placing Lorgar's sons at nearly 200,000 battle brothers spread across hundreds of worlds. This concentration of power under singular command structures proved catastrophic when those commanders chose treachery. The sons of Horus, Death Guard, Emperor's Children, and World Eaters moved as unified instruments of destruction, their massive numbers allowing them to prosecute campaigns across multiple sectors simultaneously while maintaining cohesive strategic objectives. When these legions struck at Istvan III, they did so with the coordinated precision that only decades of unified command could provide, turning loyal Astartes into ash with virus bombs deployed across an entire world's surface. The betrayal at Istvan V demonstrated even more clearly how dangerous such concentrated military might could become when turned against the Imperium. 7 legions converged on a single world, but 3 of them, the Iron Hands, Salamanders, and Raven Guard, found themselves facing not 4 enemy legions but 7, as the Iron Warriors, Night Lords, Alpha Legion, and Word Bearers revealed their treachery in a coordinated massacre that eliminated nearly 3 entire loyal legions in a matter of hours. The precision of this betrayal required the kind of inter-legion coordination that only massive, centralized command structures could achieve. Roboute Guilliman witnessed these events from Ultramar, where his own 13th Legion numbered approximately 250,000 Astartes spread across the 500 worlds. As reports filtered in from across the galaxy, the Primarch of the Ultramarines began to recognize patterns that disturbed him deeply. The traitor legions were not merely rebelling, they were exploiting fundamental weaknesses in the Imperial military doctrine that the Great Crusade had never been forced to confront. The logistical challenges alone were staggering. A legion numbering in the hundreds of thousands required supply chains that spanned multiple star systems, with forge worlds dedicated entirely to producing their ammunition, fuel, and replacement equipment. When the Word Bearers turned traitor, they brought with them not just their Astartes, but the entire industrial base of Colchis and dozens of other worlds that had been integrated into their legion's support structure. This gave them the ability to sustain prolonged campaigns without relying on potentially disloyal Imperial supply lines. Guilliman observed that these massive formations created tactical inflexibility that became apparent during the Shadow Crusade, when Angron and Lorgar's combined forces rampaged through Ultramar. The World Eaters and Word Bearers operated as vast, unwieldy hammers that could crush individual worlds, but struggled to respond to the kind of distributed, adaptive warfare that smaller formations might employ. However, their sheer size meant that even tactical mistakes rarely proved fatal. They could absorb casualties that would cripple smaller forces and continue fighting. The Primarch documented instances where legion-sized formations took months to fully deploy for major engagements, with advance elements arriving weeks before the main force and rear echelons straggling in long after battles had concluded. At Armatura, he watched World Eaters' companies arrive piecemeal over a span of 6 weeks, allowing his own forces to defeat them in detail despite being outnumbered overall. Yet when these massive formations did achieve full deployment, as they had at Nuceria, their concentrated firepower could overwhelm any conventional defense through sheer weight of numbers. The strategic implications troubled Guilliman even more than the tactical ones. A single corrupted legion could threaten entire sectors, and the resources required to counter such a force meant stripping defenses from dozens of other worlds. When Magnus the Red and his 1,000 sons turned traitor, the entire Prospero sector fell under their control not through conquest, but through the simple reality that no Imperial force in the region could match 15,000 Psyker, enhanced Astartes operating from a unified command structure. The Emperor's incapacitation during the final assault on Terra created an immediate crisis that went far beyond the loss of his direct leadership. The Master of Mankind had served as the ultimate authority over the legions, the single individual whose word could command absolute obedience from any Primarch or chapter master. With the Emperor confined to the Golden Throne, the Imperium faced the terrifying prospect of 18 independent military formations, each numbering in the tens of thousands, with no unifying authority capable of preventing future rebellions. The Siege of Terra itself provided the most damning evidence of how dangerous these massive formations had become. Horus arrived at the throne world with 9 traitor legions, their combined strength exceeding 500,000 Astartes, supported by countless mortal auxiliaries, Titan legions, and the dark machinery of the Mechanicum. The defenders, while numerous, were scattered across the system and could not achieve the same level of coordination that the traitors had spent years perfecting. The Iron Warriors, under Perdurabo's methodical command, demonstrated the terrifying efficiency that a unified legion could bring to siege warfare. Their 100,000 battle brothers had spent decades perfecting the art of fortress breaking, and at Terra, they deployed this expertise with mechanical precision. Perdurabo's forces constructed siege lines that stretched across entire continents, their artillery parks containing thousands of pieces that could concentrate fire with devastating accuracy. The Legion's unified command structure allowed them to coordinate complex engineering projects, trenches, bunkers, and gun emplacements that transformed Terra's surface into a hellscape of overlapping fields of fire. The word-bearers brought a different kind of horror to the siege, their massive numbers allowing them to conduct the kind of large-scale ritual warfare that smaller formations could never attempt. Lorgar's sons had grown to nearly 200,000 battle brothers by the war's end, and they used this strength to carve vast ritual circles into Terra's surface, each one requiring thousands of Astartes to maintain and defend. The Legion's size meant they could simultaneously assault the palace walls while dedicating entire companies to conducting the demonic summoning that would tear holes in reality itself. The Sons of Horus served as the spearpoint of the assault, but even they demonstrated the problems inherent in massive military formations. Horus commanded over 130,000 Astartes, but coordinating their assault on the Imperial Palace required complex communication networks that became increasingly vulnerable as the siege progressed. Loyalist forces repeatedly targeted Sons of Horus command posts, and each successful strike created cascading failures as entire companies lost contact with their parent formations. The Death Guard's contribution to the siege revealed another weakness of oversized legions, their vulnerability to specialized threats. Mortarian's sons had swollen to nearly 100,000 battle brothers, but their exposure to Nurgle's plagues meant that their massive numbers became a liability rather than an asset. Disease spread through their ranks with terrifying speed, and the Legion's tight command structure ensured that corruption reached every level of their hierarchy simultaneously. The Emperor's children, numbering close to 110,000 at the siege's height, showed how quickly massive formations could become uncontrollable when their unifying leadership failed. Fulgrim's increasing obsession with perfection and excess meant that his legion's command structure began to fracture, with individual companies pursuing their own twisted objectives rather than contributing to the overall assault. Their numbers became meaningless when they could no longer operate as a unified force. Throughout the siege, Guilliman's representatives observed and documented the tactical patterns that emerged. Massive legion formations excelled at overwhelming static defenses through sheer weight of numbers, but they struggled to adapt when their initial assault plans failed. The traitor legions had spent months preparing for a conventional siege, and when the Emperor's psychic defenses began to manifest in unexpected ways, their rigid command structures proved unable to respond effectively. The Loyalist defenders, despite being outnumbered, demonstrated the advantages of more flexible command structures. The Imperial Fists, Blood Angels, and White Scars operated as independent formations that could respond rapidly to changing tactical situations. When traitor forces breached the Eternity Gate, it was not a massive counterattack that sealed the breach, but a series of rapid, coordinated strikes by smaller formations that could move and communicate more efficiently than their oversized opponents. The final assault on the vengeful spirit revealed the ultimate weakness of the Legion system, its dependence on singular leadership. When Horus fell to the Emperor's wrath, the entire traitor war effort collapsed within hours. 9 legions that had fought with unified purpose for 7 years suddenly found themselves without central coordination, and their massive formations became liabilities as they struggled to organize a coherent retreat. The aftermath of the heresy left the Imperium with a fundamental problem that demanded immediate solution. The surviving Loyalist legions, the Ultramarines, Imperial Fists, Iron Hands, White Scars, Space Wolves, Dark Angels, Salamanders, and Raven Guard, still represented massive concentrations of military power that could theoretically threaten Imperial authority if their leadership chose rebellion. The precedent had been set, and the vulnerability of the Legion system had been proven through 7 years of devastating civil war. Guilliman's analysis of the heresy's lessons formed the foundation of what would become the Codex Astartes, but the immediate need was for a complete restructuring of the Adeptus Astartes that would prevent any future rebellion from achieving the scale and coordination that had nearly destroyed the Imperium. The massive Legion formations that had conquered the galaxy during the Great Crusade had proven themselves too dangerous to continue existing in their current form. The reconstruction of Imperial military doctrine fell to perhaps the only Primarch uniquely qualified for such a monumental undertaking. Roboute Guilliman had spent over 2 centuries transforming Ultramar from a collection of feuding city-states into the most efficiently governed realm in human space, demonstrating an administrative genius that matched his tactical acumen. Where other Primarchs excelled in specific aspects of warfare, Rogel Dorn in fortification, Jagatai Khan in rapid assault, or Vulcan in siege breaking, Guilliman possessed the rare combination of strategic vision and systematic methodology necessary to codify military doctrine on a galactic scale. The 500 worlds of Ultramar served as Guilliman's laboratory for military and governmental theory long before the Horus Heresy forced the Imperium to confront its structural weaknesses. Each world within his domain operated according to carefully crafted administrative protocols that balanced local autonomy with centralized oversight, creating a system that could respond rapidly to threats while maintaining long-term strategic coherence. The planet Calth, for instance, functioned as both a major industrial center and a training ground for Ultramarines recruits, its massive underground cities designed to continue production even under orbital bombardment. This integration of military and civilian infrastructure reflected Guilliman's understanding that effective warfare required more than tactical excellence. It demanded sustainable systems that could endure prolonged conflicts. Guilliman's approach to governance in Ultramar revealed his fundamental philosophy regarding military organization. Rather than ruling through personal charisma or fear, as many of his brothers did, he established institutional frameworks that could function effectively regardless of individual leadership. The Ultramarines Legion itself reflected this principle, with its company commanders trained to operate independently while maintaining coordination with larger strategic objectives. During the Great Crusade, Ultramarines formations routinely split across multiple theaters without losing operational effectiveness, a capability that proved invaluable when the heresy scattered Imperial forces across the galaxy. The Primarch's military background provided him with empirical data that other Legion commanders lacked. Ultramar's integration process had required the 13th Legion to conduct hundreds of compliance actions against diverse opponents, from technologically advanced human civilizations to xeno-species with radically different tactical doctrines. Each campaign generated lessons that Guilliman meticulously documented, creating a database of military knowledge that spanned everything from urban warfare in hive cities to void battles against orc space hulks. This systematic approach to learning distinguished Guilliman from Primarchs who relied primarily on intuition or specialized expertise. The Shadow Crusade provided Guilliman with direct experience of the Legion system's fundamental flaws when Angron and Lorgar brought their combined forces to Ultramar. The World Eaters and Word Bearers arrived as two massive hammers seeking to crush Ultramar's defenses through overwhelming force, but Guilliman's response demonstrated the advantages of more flexible command structures. Rather than meeting the traitors with a single massive counterattack, the Ultramarines dispersed across multiple worlds, forcing their enemies to divide their attention while maintaining coordination through carefully established communication networks. At Armatura, Guilliman observed how the World Eater's rigid command structure became a liability when faced with adaptive opposition. The 12th Legion's companies arrived according to predetermined schedules that took no account of changing tactical situations, allowing Ultramarines' forces to position themselves advantageously for each engagement. The World Eaters fought with berserker fury that made them individually formidable, but their inability to modify their approach meant that Guilliman could predict their movements with mathematical precision. Each World Eater's assault followed patterns established during the Great Crusade, and these patterns had become predictable through repetition. The Word Bearers presented a different challenge that further reinforced Guilliman's evolving theories about military organization. Lorgar's sons operated with the kind of unified purpose that only decades of shared indoctrination could create. But this unity became inflexibility when confronted with situations their doctrine had not anticipated. The 17th Legion's massive ritual formations required extensive preparation and coordination, making them vulnerable to rapid strikes by smaller Ultramarines forces that could disrupt their ceremonies before they reached completion. Guilliman's analysis of these engagements led him to develop what he termed the theoretical practical, a systematic approach to military doctrine that combined empirical observation with logical analysis. Unlike the intuitive leadership style favored by many of his brothers, Guilliman believed that effective military doctrine must be based on verifiable principles that could be taught, learned, and improved through experience. The theoretical practical represented an attempt to codify not just tactical procedures, but the underlying reasoning that made those procedures effective. The foundation of the theoretical practical rested on Guilliman's observation that successful military formations required three essential characteristics: adaptability, sustainability, and redundancy. Adaptability meant the ability to modify tactics based on changing circumstances without losing operational coherence. Sustainability required logistics and command structures that could maintain effectiveness over extended periods without external support. Redundancy ensured that the loss of individual leaders or units would not compromise the formation's overall capability. Guilliman's study of other loyal legions during the Heresy provided him with examples of how these principles manifested in different tactical doctrines. The Raven Guard, despite suffering catastrophic losses at Istvan V, demonstrated remarkable adaptability through their emphasis on stealth and infiltration tactics. Corax's sons could operate effectively in small groups that required minimal logistical support while maintaining coordination through encrypted communications and predetermined rally points. Their doctrine emphasized individual initiative within clearly defined parameters, allowing Raven Guard operatives to respond to unexpected situations without waiting for orders from higher command. The Imperial Fists showcased the principle of sustainability through their mastery of defensive warfare. Rogel Dorn's Legion had developed supply and fortification techniques that allowed them to hold positions indefinitely against superior numbers, transforming time itself into a weapon against their enemies. During the Siege of Terra, Imperial Fists formations demonstrated how proper preparation could multiply the effectiveness of limited forces, with carefully positioned defensive lines channeling enemy attacks into predetermined kill zones where concentrated firepower could achieve maximum effect. The White Scars exemplified redundancy through their emphasis on mobility and distributed command structures. Jagatai Khan's sons operated in hunting packs that could function independently while supporting larger strategic objectives, their mastery of hit and run tactics allowing them to engage superior forces without risking decisive defeat. Each White Scars formation contained multiple specialists capable of assuming command responsibilities, ensuring that tactical leadership remained effective even after suffering casualties. The Iron Hands provided a different model of redundancy through their integration of mechanical augmentation and tactical doctrine. Despite the loss of Ferrus Manus at Istvan V, the 10th Legion continued fighting with mechanical precision because their tactical procedures had been systematized to minimize dependence on individual leadership. Iron Hands commanders made decisions based on logical analysis rather than emotional responses, creating a predictable but effective approach to warfare that could be maintained regardless of personnel changes. Guilliman's integration of these observations with pre-existing Ultramarines doctrine created a synthesis that addressed the fundamental weaknesses revealed during the heresy. The 13th Legion had always emphasized tactical flexibility and combined arms operations, but the theoretical practical provided a framework for extending these principles across different types of military formations. Rather than simply copying successful tactics from other legions, Guilliman sought to understand the underlying principles that made those tactics effective and adapt them to different operational requirements. The Ultramarines' traditional emphasis on combined arms warfare provided an excellent foundation for this synthesis. Since the early days of the Great Crusade, the 13th Legion had integrated infantry, armor, and air support into cohesive tactical formations that could adapt to various battlefield conditions. This approach required extensive coordination between different unit types, fostering a command culture that emphasized communication and mutual support rather than individual heroics. Guilliman's analysis revealed that successful combined arms operations required commanders who understood not just their own capabilities, but those of their supporting elements. An Ultramarines captain leading an infantry assault needed to coordinate with tank commanders, artillery spotters, and air support pilots, requiring communication skills and tactical knowledge that went far beyond personal combat prowess. This breadth of knowledge made Ultramarines officers naturally suited to independent command, as they possessed the technical expertise necessary to coordinate complex operations without constant supervision. The theoretical practical extended this principle by establishing standardized procedures that allowed different formations to coordinate effectively regardless of their specific composition. Guilliman developed communication protocols, targeting procedures, and logistical systems that could be applied across various unit types, creating a common tactical language that facilitated cooperation between different military formations. These standards ensured that an infantry company could effectively coordinate with armor support even if the two units had never previously operated together. The systematic nature of Guilliman's approach distinguished the theoretical practical from the more intuitive doctrines favored by other legions. Where the Space Wolves relied on individual prowess and pack instincts developed through shared experience, Guilliman created explicit procedures that could be taught to new recruits and applied consistently across different situations. This systematization made Ultramarines' tactical doctrine more accessible to ordinary human commanders, facilitating coordination between Astartes formations and regular Imperial forces. Guilliman's documentation process became as important as the tactical principles themselves. The Primarch established comprehensive record-keeping procedures that captured not just successful tactics, but the reasoning behind tactical decisions and the circumstances that made those decisions appropriate. These records formed the foundation of what would eventually become the Codex Astartes, but during the heresy, they served as a living database that allowed Ultramarines commanders to learn from each other's experiences and adapt their tactics based on empirical evidence. The theoretical practical's emphasis on logical analysis rather than tradition or intuition represented a fundamental shift in how military doctrine could be developed and transmitted. Instead of relying on the personal charisma of individual leaders or the accumulated wisdom of ancient traditions, Guilliman created a system that could evolve and improve through systematic study of battlefield results. This approach made military expertise more democratic, as junior officers could contribute to doctrinal development by documenting their own experiences and observations. The integration of lessons learned from other loyal legions required careful analysis to distinguish between tactics that were universally applicable and those that depended on specific capabilities or circumstances. Raven Guard stealth techniques, for example, required specialized training and equipment that might not be available to all formations, but the underlying principles of reconnaissance and infiltration could be adapted to different operational contexts. Guilliman's challenge was to extract these underlying principles without losing the specific advantages that made each legion's approach effective in their chosen specialization. The implementation of Guilliman's theoretical frameworks faced its greatest test not on distant battlefields, but in the council chambers of Terra, where the surviving Primarchs and High Lords gathered to address the Imperium's most pressing structural crisis. 7 years had passed since Horus's death aboard the Vengeful Spirit, and the massive Loyalist legions remained largely intact, their hundreds of thousands of warriors representing potential threats that could dwarf the heresy's devastation if their loyalty ever wavered. The political necessity of the Second Founding became undeniable when reports reached Terra of increasing tensions between different Legion elements, particularly within the Imperial Fists and Iron Hands, where conflicting interpretations of their Primarch's final orders had created factional disputes that threatened to explode into open warfare. The military arguments for Legion dissolution proved equally compelling when strategic analysts presented their assessments of Imperial defense capabilities. The existing Legion structure concentrated overwhelming force in relatively few formations, creating vast gaps in the Imperium's defensive coverage that hostile forces could exploit. A single legion numbering 100,000 Astartes might dominate any engagement it participated in, but it could only be present in one location at a time, leaving entire sectors vulnerable while it prosecuted campaigns elsewhere. The Ultramarines' deployment during the Shadow Crusade illustrated this problem perfectly. While Guilliman's forces defended Ultramar against the Word-Bearers and World Eaters, dozens of other worlds fell to opportunistic raiders and Xenos incursions that a smaller but more widely distributed force might have prevented. Logistical considerations added another layer of urgency to the restructuring debate. The massive supply chains required to maintain Legion-sized formations had become increasingly unstable as the Imperium struggled to rebuild its shattered infrastructure. The Imperial Fists alone required the output of 17 Forge Worlds to maintain their full strength, and these production facilities had become prime targets for enemy raids precisely because their destruction would cripple an entire legion's combat effectiveness. Smaller formations would require less concentrated industrial support, making the overall military structure more resilient to targeted attacks while reducing the economic burden on individual worlds. The Codex Astartes emerged from this crisis as more than a tactical manual. It represented a comprehensive restructuring of the Adeptus Astartes that would address every aspect of Space Marine organization, from recruitment procedures to strategic deployment. Guilliman's document specified that each new chapter would consist of approximately 1,000 battle brothers organized into 10 companies of 100 Marines each, with the first company comprising veteran Terminators, companies 2 through 5 serving as battle companies equipped for independent operations, companies 6 through 9 functioning as reserve formations, and the 10th company housing scouts and new recruits undergoing final training. This organizational structure reflected Guilliman's analysis of optimal force deployment ratios developed through extensive study of Ultramarines' operations during the Great Crusade and Heresy. 1,000 Marine formation possessed sufficient firepower to engage most threats independently while remaining small enough to deploy rapidly and maintain effective command and control. The 10-company structure provided tactical flexibility that larger formations lacked. A chapter master could deploy individual companies to address multiple simultaneous threats or concentrate several companies for major operations, without requiring the complex coordination networks that had proven vulnerable during Legion-scale engagements. The chapter system addressed the sustainability problems that had plagued Legion operations by creating self-contained military units capable of independent recruitment, training, and equipment maintenance. Each chapter would maintain its own fortress monastery, recruitment worlds, and support infrastructure, eliminating the centralized vulnerabilities that had allowed traitor forces to cripple entire legions by capturing key facilities. The Iron Hands had suffered disproportionately during the heresy, partly because their recruitment and training facilities were concentrated on Medusa and a handful of allied Forge worlds. When these locations came under attack, the entire legion's ability to replace casualties was compromised. The redundancy built into the chapter system extended beyond simple numbers to encompass tactical doctrine and institutional knowledge. Where legion commanders had developed highly specialized approaches that reflected their Primarch's preferences and capabilities, chapter masters would be trained in broader tactical principles that could adapt to various operational requirements. This standardization would prevent the kind of doctrinal rigidity that had made some legions predictable to their enemies, while ensuring that any chapter could coordinate effectively with Imperial Guard regiments, Navy squadrons, or other Space Marine formations. The division of the 9 loyal legions required careful consideration of each formation's unique characteristics and operational history. The Ultramarines, as the largest surviving legion with approximately 250,000 battle brothers, would spawn the greatest number of successor chapters. Guilliman's meticulous records of his legion's operations provided detailed assessments of individual companies and their specializations, allowing him to create new chapters that preserved specific tactical expertise while maintaining the flexibility that the Codex demanded. The Genesis chapter emerged as one of the first Ultramarine successors, formed around the 8th Company's veterans who had distinguished themselves during the defense of Calth against Word-Bearer's orbital bombardment. These Marines had developed exceptional expertise in void warfare and boarding actions, skills that would prove invaluable as the Imperium sought to rebuild its naval capabilities. The Genesis chapter's first chapter master, a former Ultramarines captain named Lucian Ventanis, had commanded underground resistance operations on Calth for over 2 years, demonstrating the kind of independent leadership that the new chapter system required. The Aurora chapter drew its initial membership from Ultramarines companies that had specialized in rapid deployment operations across Ultramar's widely scattered worlds. These Marines had mastered the complex logistics of intersystem warfare, developing techniques for establishing temporary bases and supply lines that allowed them to operate independently for extended periods. Their expertise in mobile warfare complemented the Genesis chapter's void combat specialization, creating 2 formations with distinct but compatible tactical doctrines that could support each other during joint operations. The Nova Marines represented a different approach to Legion division, incorporating Marines from multiple Ultramarines companies who had served together during specific campaigns rather than maintaining existing unit structures. This mixing process was designed to prevent the new chapters from developing the kind of insular cultures that might eventually lead to the factional disputes that had plagued some legions. The Nova Marines' diverse backgrounds required them to develop new traditions and operational procedures, creating a chapter culture that emphasized adaptation and cooperation rather than adherence to pre-existing customs. The Imperial Fists presented unique challenges for the second founding due to their Primarch's initial resistance to the Codex's implementation and the Legion's deeply ingrained traditions of fortress warfare and siege breaking. Rogel Dorn's sons had spent the 7 years since Terra's siege rebuilding the Imperial Palace and establishing defensive positions throughout the Sol system, work that required the kind of massive, coordinated effort that only Legion-sized formations could accomplish. The prospect of dividing these forces seemed to threaten not just the Legion's effectiveness, but the security of humanity's throne world itself. Dorn's opposition to the Codex reflected more than simple attachment to existing traditions. It represented a fundamental disagreement about the nature of military effectiveness and the lessons that should be drawn from the heresy's devastation. The Imperial Fists Primarch argued that the traitor legions had succeeded not because of their size, but because of their corruption, and that dividing the loyal legions would weaken the Imperium's defenses without addressing the real causes of the rebellion. His position gained support from elements within other legions, who feared that smaller formations would prove unable to handle the massive threats that the galaxy continued to produce. The Iron Cage incident forced a resolution to this debate through the harsh realities of combat rather than political maneuvering. When Iron Warriors forces established a massive fortress complex in the Sebastos system, apparently as a direct challenge to Imperial authority, Dorn led a substantial portion of the Imperial Fist's Legion in an assault that was intended to demonstrate the continued relevance of Legion-scale operations. The Iron Warriors, under Perdurabo's methodical command, had prepared their defenses specifically to counter the Imperial Fist's traditional siege-breaking tactics, creating a killing ground that exploited every weakness in the 7th Legion's doctrine. The Iron Cage's defensive systems reflected Perdurabo's intimate knowledge of his brother's tactical preferences and the Imperial Fist's operational history. Concentric rings of fortifications channeled attacking forces into predetermined kill zones, where overlapping fields of fire could concentrate on relatively small areas, while underground tunnel networks allowed defenders to reinforce threatened positions without exposing themselves to counter battery fire. The fortress complex covered an area larger than most hive cities, its massive scale designed to force the Imperial Fists to commit their entire strength, while preventing them from achieving the kind of concentrated assault that had proven effective during the Siege of Terra. The assault began according to Imperial Fist's doctrine, with massive artillery barrages intended to suppress the outer defensive lines, while assault companies prepared for coordinated breaches of the fortress walls. However, the Iron Warriors had anticipated these tactics and prepared countermeasures that turned the Imperial Fist's strengths against them. Their return fire targeted not just the attacking forces, but the supply lines and communication networks that connected different elements of the assault, creating coordination failures that multiplied as the battle progressed. Imperial Fist's companies found themselves isolated in individual sections of the fortress complex, their communications disrupted by jamming systems, and their supply lines cut by precisely targeted artillery strikes. The Legion's traditional emphasis on coordinated assault became a liability when coordination became impossible, and individual companies were forced to continue their attacks according to predetermined plans that no longer matched battlefield realities. The Iron Warriors exploited these coordination failures by concentrating their forces against isolated Imperial Fists formations, achieving local superiority despite being outnumbered overall. The battle's progression demonstrated exactly the kind of inflexibility that Guilliman had identified as a fundamental weakness of Legion-scale operations. The Imperial Fists had committed too much of their strength to modify their approach once the initial assault plans proved inadequate, and their massive formation proved unable to adapt to the Iron Warriors' defensive innovations. Individual companies showed tactical brilliance and desperate courage, but their efforts were wasted because the Legion's command structure could not coordinate an effective response to changing battlefield conditions. The Ultramarines' intervention that finally broke the Iron Cage siege validated the principles underlying the Codex Astartes through practical demonstration rather than theoretical argument. Guilliman's forces arrived as multiple independent formations that could assess the tactical situation and adapt their approach without requiring approval from a centralized command structure. Rather than attempting a single massive assault, the Ultramarines coordinated simultaneous attacks on multiple sections of the fortress complex, forcing the Iron Warriors to divide their attention and preventing them from achieving the concentrated defense that had proven so effective against the Imperial Fists. The aftermath of the Iron Cage left Rogal Dorn with undeniable evidence of his Legion's tactical limitations and the validity of Guilliman's organizational theories. The Imperial Fists had suffered casualties that would have crippled a smaller formation, but more importantly, they had demonstrated their inability to adapt to unexpected tactical situations when operating as a unified legion. The survivors returned to Terra with a new understanding of the flexibility that smaller formations could provide and a grudging acceptance of the Codex's wisdom. The division of the Imperial Fists proceeded with careful attention to preserving the Legion's specialized knowledge while creating formations capable of independent operation. The Black Templars emerged as the most distinctive successor chapter, incorporating the Legion's most aggressive assault specialists under the leadership of Sigismund, the first captain whose prowess in single combat had earned him recognition as the Imperium's greatest duelist. The Black Templars' formation reflected Dorn's recognition that some aspects of Imperial Fist's culture were too valuable to lose, even as the Legion adapted to new organizational requirements. The Crimson Fists represented a different approach to preserving Imperial Fist traditions, incorporating the Legion's expertise in defensive warfare and siege breaking while adapting these skills to the smaller-scale operations that the Codex demanded. Their first chapter master, Alexis Pollux, had commanded void-based operations during the Siege of Terra and possessed the kind of flexible tactical thinking that would prove essential for independent chapter operations. The Crimson Fist's specialization in defensive warfare complemented the Black Templars' assault capabilities, creating two formations with distinct but related tactical doctrines. The sacred number of 1,000 battle brothers represented far more than arbitrary limitation. It embodied Guilliman's careful calculation of optimal force deployment ratios derived from 2 centuries of empirical observation across hundreds of compliance actions during the Great Crusade. The Primarch's analysis revealed that formations exceeding this threshold began experiencing exponential increases in coordination complexity while suffering diminishing returns in tactical effectiveness. A 1,000 Marine chapter possessed sufficient firepower to engage most threats independently while remaining small enough to deploy rapidly through standard Imperial Navy transport capacity and maintain effective command structures that could adapt to changing battlefield conditions without the cumbersome communication networks that had proven vulnerable during Legion-scale operations. The mathematical precision underlying this organizational structure reflected Guilliman's systematic approach to military doctrine, where every element served multiple strategic purposes. A chapter numbering exactly 1,000 battle brothers could never achieve the kind of sector-spanning dominance that had made the traitor legions so dangerous, yet it retained enough strength to serve as the primary military force for entire subsectors when properly supported by Imperial Guard regiments and Navy squadrons. This balance ensured that no single chapter master could accumulate the kind of independent power base that might tempt ambitious commanders toward rebellion, while maintaining sufficient combat capability to address the galaxy's myriad threats. The 10-company structure provided tactical flexibility that larger formations fundamentally lacked, with each company designed to fulfill specific operational roles, while maintaining the ability to coordinate with other chapter elements during major campaigns. The first company housed the chapter's most experienced warriors, typically numbering between 80 and 100 veterans who had earned the right to wear tactical dreadnought armor and wield the chapter's most sacred weapons. These Terminators served as both an elite assault force and a repository of institutional knowledge, their decades of combat experience providing guidance to younger Marines, while their Terminator suits allowed them to spearhead assaults against the most dangerous opponents. The composition of the first company reflected careful selection processes that went far beyond simple combat prowess, though martial skill remained the primary qualification for advancement. Veterans earned their place through demonstrated leadership under fire, tactical innovation during difficult campaigns, and the kind of steady reliability that marked true warriors rather than mere killers. A Terminator sergeant might have served for over a century in the battle companies, accumulating experience in void warfare, urban combat, siege operations, and Xenos extermination before earning promotion to the first company's ranks. The sacred suits of tactical dreadnought armor worn by First Company veterans represented irreplaceable artifacts that connected each chapter to the Great Crusade's legacy, their machine spirits bearing the imprints of countless battles and the wisdom of previous wearers. The process of donning Terminator armor involved extensive ritual preparation and neural interface calibration that could take hours to complete properly, making these suits impractical for rapid deployment operations, but invaluable for planned assaults against heavily fortified positions or demon-infested hulks where their enhanced protection and firepower could prove decisive. The battle companies, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, formed the chapter's primary striking force, each maintaining exactly 100 Marines organized into 10 tactical squads that could be reconfigured into assault or devastator formations as battlefield conditions demanded. This standardized structure allowed battle companies to operate independently while maintaining the ability to coordinate effectively with other chapter elements, their identical organization ensuring that commanders could predict friendly capabilities and coordinate support without extensive briefings or specialized knowledge. Each battle company maintained its own Rhino armored personnel carriers, land speeder squadrons, and dreadnought chassis, creating self-contained military formations capable of prosecuting independent campaigns without requiring support from other chapter elements. The 2nd Company typically received priority for equipment upgrades and veteran reinforcements, reflecting its traditional role as the chapter's premier formation, while the 3rd, 4th, and 5th Companies served as the backbone of most chapter operations through their ability to deploy rapidly and sustain combat operations across multiple theaters simultaneously. The tactical squads within each battle company represented the fundamental building blocks of Space Marine warfare, their 10 Marine composition reflecting optimal squad dynamics developed through millennia of combat experience. A tactical squad included a sergeant with enhanced combat experience and leadership training, 8 battle brothers equipped with standard bolters and combat knives, and 1 Marine carrying specialized weapons such as a flamer, melt-a-gun, or plasma gun, depending on anticipated threats. This organization provided tactical flexibility while maintaining unit cohesion, allowing squad leaders to adapt their formations to various combat situations without losing the mutual support that made Space Marine squads so effective. The reserve companies, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th, served multiple functions within the chapter's organizational structure, providing specialized capabilities that supported the battle companies while maintaining strategic reserves that could respond to unexpected threats or replace casualties during extended campaigns. The 6th and 7th companies consisted entirely of tactical squads that could reinforce the battle companies or operate independently when circumstances demanded dispersed operations across multiple worlds. These reserve tactical companies often received assignments to garrison important facilities, conduct training exercises with Imperial Guard regiments, or investigate reports of heretical activity that might not warrant full battle company deployment. The 8th Company specialized in assault operations, its Marines equipped with jump packs, chainswords, and bolt pistols that allowed them to close rapidly with enemy positions and engage in the kind of brutal melee combat that could break enemy morale and shatter defensive lines. Assault Marines underwent extensive training in close quarters combat techniques, urban warfare, and the complex 3-dimensional tactics required for jump pack operations, their specialized skills making them invaluable for boarding actions, hive city clearance operations, and assaults against fortified positions where ranged firepower alone proved insufficient. The 9th Company provided heavy weapons support through its Devastator squads, each equipped with missile launchers, heavy bolters, las cannons, or plasma cannons that could engage armored targets and provide suppressing fire during major assaults. Devastator Marines received extensive training in target identification, ballistics calculation, and the maintenance of complex weapon systems, their technical expertise making them valuable assets beyond their immediate firepower contribution. Many Devastator veterans eventually transferred to the chapter's Tech Marine cadre, their understanding of heavy weapons systems providing excellent preparation for the more advanced technological training required for that specialized role. The 10th Company occupied a unique position within the chapter hierarchy as both the newest and most expendable formation, housing Scout Marines who had completed their basic indoctrination, but had not yet earned the right to receive their black carapace implant and power armor. These young warriors served as the chapter's eyes and ears, their enhanced senses and stealth training allowing them to conduct reconnaissance missions and infiltration operations that would be impossible for fully armored battle brothers. Scout squads typically numbered between 5 and 10 Marines, depending on mission requirements, their smaller size reflecting both their specialized role and the reality that Scout casualties were more easily replaced than those suffered by veteran formations. The command hierarchy within each chapter reflected careful balance between centralized authority and decentralized execution, with the chapter master serving as supreme commander while delegating tactical authority to subordinate officers who possess the expertise and flexibility necessary for independent operations. Chapter masters typically rose from the ranks of company captains, their selection based on demonstrated leadership abilities, tactical acumen, and the kind of strategic thinking required to coordinate complex multi-company operations across different theaters simultaneously. The 10 company captains served as the chapter master's primary subordinates, each responsible for maintaining their formation's combat readiness while developing specialized expertise that contributed to the chapter's overall capabilities. A typical captain had served for over 2 centuries, accumulating experience across multiple company assignments before earning promotion to company command. The captain of the first company held particular prestige within the chapter hierarchy, his responsibility for the veteran terminators and ancient weapons making him the keeper of the chapter's most sacred traditions and military knowledge. Lieutenants provided essential command redundancy within each company, their presence ensuring that tactical leadership remained effective even after suffering casualties during intense combat operations. The Codex specified that each battle company should maintain at least 2 lieutenant positions, while reserve companies typically operated with single lieutenants who could assume company command if their captain became incapacitated. These officers underwent extensive tactical training that prepared them for independent command responsibilities, their education encompassing everything from logistics and communications to the complex coordination required for joint operations with other Imperial forces. Sergeants formed the backbone of the chapter's leadership structure, their direct command of individual squads making them responsible for implementing tactical decisions and maintaining unit cohesion under fire. The promotion to sergeant typically required decades of service and demonstrated excellence in combat, with candidates selected based on their ability to inspire confidence in their subordinates while maintaining the discipline necessary for effective military operations. Veteran sergeants often possessed specialized knowledge that made them valuable advisors to company officers, their intimate understanding of squad-level tactics providing insights that could influence larger strategic decisions. The specialized roles of chaplains, librarians, and tech marines operated outside the normal company structure, while providing essential services that supported the chapter's spiritual, psychic, and technological needs. Chaplains served as both spiritual guides and morale officers, their responsibility for maintaining the chapter's faith and fighting spirit making them crucial elements during extended campaigns where ordinary Marines might begin to question their purpose or lose confidence in their abilities. The chaplain's distinctive skull helm and black power armor marked them as figures of both inspiration and intimidation, their presence on the battlefield serving as a reminder of the Emperor's divine protection and the sacred nature of their mission. Librarians provided psychic support that could prove decisive during encounters with demonic entities, xenopsychers, or heretical cultists who wielded the powers of the warp against Imperial forces. These warrior mystics underwent extensive training to control their psychic abilities while maintaining the mental discipline necessary to resist chaos corruption, their mastery of both martial and psychic arts making them among the most versatile specialists within the chapter. A chief librarian typically possessed centuries of experience and psychic power ratings, that allowed them to challenge even greater demons in direct confrontation, though such encounters remained extremely dangerous even for the most accomplished battle psychers. Tech Marines bridged the gap between the Adeptus Astartes and the Adeptus Mechanicus, their dual loyalty creating occasional tensions, but providing essential technical expertise that kept the chapter's equipment functioning at peak efficiency. These warrior engineers underwent extensive training on Mars, where they learned the sacred rituals and technical knowledge necessary to maintain power armor, vehicles, and the complex weapon systems that made Space Marine formations so effective. The chapter's senior Tech Marine, typically holding the rank of Master of the Forge, supervised the Fortress Monastery's armory and vehicle pools, while coordinating with Mechanicus Forge Worlds to ensure adequate supplies of ammunition, spare parts, and replacement equipment. Chapter serfs represented the massive support structure required to maintain a Space Marine chapter's operations, their numbers often exceeding the Battle Brothers by ratios of 10-to-1 or higher, depending on the chapter's specific requirements and available resources. These human servants handled the countless logistical tasks that kept the Fortress Monastery functioning, from food preparation and facility maintenance to ammunition production and vehicle servicing. Many chapter serfs came from the same recruitment worlds as the Space Marines themselves, their genetic compatibility making them suitable for various augmentation procedures that enhanced their ability to serve their superhuman masters. The most capable chapter serfs might receive minor cybernetic enhancements or chemical treatments that improved their strength, endurance, or technical abilities, creating a skilled workforce that could handle complex tasks while remaining completely loyal to the chapter. Some serfs specialized in particular areas such as armory maintenance, communications operations, or medical support, their expertise making them valuable assets whose loss could significantly impact chapter operations. The relationship between Space Marines and their serfs reflected the feudal traditions that pervaded Imperial culture, with the Battle Brothers serving as warrior nobles, while the serfs provided the economic and logistical foundation that made their military activities possible. Servitors filled roles that required reliable automation without the risks associated with advanced artificial intelligence, their lobotomized human brains providing biological processing power, while cybernetic implants allowed them to interface directly with the Fortress Monastery systems. These cyborg servants handled routine maintenance tasks, heavy lifting, and dangerous operations that might prove fatal to unaugmented humans, their lack of independent thought making them ideal for repetitive work that required precision but not creativity. The chapter's Tech Marines supervised the servitor workforce, programming them for specific tasks while ensuring that their cybernetic systems remained functional and their biological components received adequate maintenance. The Fortress Monastery itself required constant attention from hundreds of serfs and dozens of servitors, its massive structure housing not just living quarters and training facilities, but armories, vehicle bays, communications centers, medical facilities, and the sacred spaces where the chapter's most important rituals took place. The Fortress Monastery's defensive systems included orbital defense platforms, surface-to-air missile batteries, and void shields that could protect against bombardment from hostile fleets, making it both a military installation and a symbol of the chapter's power and permanence. The Codex Astartes transformed battlefield doctrine from the intuitive heroics that had characterized Legion warfare into a systematic science of coordinated destruction, where every tactical element operated according to proven principles that maximized combat effectiveness while minimizing unnecessary casualties. The combined arms approach that Guilliman codified drew upon decades of Ultramarines' operational experience, where infantry, armor, and air support functioned as integrated components of a single weapon system rather than separate forces that happened to share the same battlefield. This integration required extensive training and communication protocols that went far beyond the individual prowess that had defined Space Marine warfare during the Great Crusade, demanding commanders who understood not just their own capabilities, but those of every supporting element under their command. The foundation of combined arms doctrine rested on the principle that different weapon systems possessed complementary strengths that could compensate for individual weaknesses when properly coordinated. Infantry squads provided flexibility and the ability to secure terrain, but they lacked the mobility and firepower necessary to engage heavily armored targets effectively. Predator tanks and land raiders delivered devastating firepower and protection against enemy weapons, but their limited visibility and vulnerability to close assault made them dependent on infantry support for reconnaissance and security. Thunderhawk gunships and land speeders offered rapid deployment and aerial reconnaissance capabilities, but their relatively light armor made them unsuitable for sustained combat without ground-based fire support. The tactical integration of these elements required communication systems that could coordinate multiple unit types simultaneously while maintaining the flexibility necessary for rapid adaptation to changing battlefield conditions. Vox networks linked squad leaders, vehicle commanders, and air support pilots through encrypted channels that allowed real-time coordination without compromising operational security. Target designation systems enabled infantry spotters to direct artillery fire and airstrikes with precision that maximized damage to enemy forces, while minimizing the risk of friendly fire incidents that had plagued less coordinated military formations. The Codex specified deployment procedures that transformed the chaotic arrival of reinforcements into precisely orchestrated operations, where every element arrived at the optimal moment to support the overall tactical plan. Drop pod assaults exemplified this systematic approach, with each pod's trajectory calculated to place its occupants in positions that maximize their tactical effectiveness while supporting the broader operational objectives. The initial wave of drop pods typically carried tactical squads equipped for immediate combat, their rapid deployment allowing them to secure landing zones and eliminate point defense systems that might threaten subsequent waves. The timing of drop pod deployments followed mathematical models that Guilliman had developed through analysis of hundreds of planetary assault operations, where the interval between successive waves could determine the difference between tactical success and catastrophic failure. Pods arriving too quickly might overwhelm the initial landing force's ability to provide adequate fire support, while excessive delays between waves allowed enemy forces to reposition and concentrate their defenses against predictable landing sites. The optimal deployment schedule typically placed the first wave's arrival 30 to 45 seconds before the second wave, providing sufficient time for initial tactical assessment while maintaining the momentum necessary to prevent effective enemy countermeasures. Drop pod assault doctrine required extensive coordination between the deploying forces and supporting elements that remained aboard the strike cruisers and battle barges orbiting overhead. Orbital bombardment preceded the drop by precisely calculated intervals, with lance strikes and macro cannon barrages targeting enemy command posts, communications centers, and heavy weapon positions that posed the greatest threat to the incoming Marines. The bombardment's timing had to account for atmospheric conditions, enemy air defense capabilities, and the need to avoid cratering landing zones so severely that the drop pods could not deploy effectively. The selection of drop pod landing sites reflected careful analysis of terrain features, enemy deployment patterns, and the tactical objectives that each squad needed to accomplish once they reached the surface. Primary landing zones were chosen to provide cover from enemy fire while offering good fields of observation and movement toward key objectives. Secondary sites served as alternatives if primary zones proved unsuitable due to enemy action or unexpected terrain features, while tertiary locations provided emergency options for pods that suffered navigation failures or combat damage during descent. Thunderhawk insertions offered different tactical advantages that complemented drop pod assaults, their ability to carry larger loads and provide close air support, making them invaluable for operations that required sustained firepower or the deployment of heavy equipment. The Thunderhawk's versatility allowed it to serve simultaneously as a transport, gunship, and command platform, its sophisticated sensor systems providing battlefield intelligence that could coordinate the actions of ground forces across wide areas. The aircraft's armor and defensive systems made it capable of operating in contested airspace where lighter vehicles would prove vulnerable to enemy fire. The coordination between Thunderhawk crews and ground forces required specialized training that went beyond standard pilot qualifications, as the aircraft's effectiveness depended on its crew's ability to understand ground tactical requirements and adapt their support accordingly. Thunderhawk pilots underwent extensive cross-training with infantry units, learning to recognize tactical situations from aerial perspectives and coordinate their weapon systems with ground-based operations. This integration allowed Thunderhawk gunships to provide close air support with precision that maximized damage to enemy forces while minimizing risks to friendly troops operating in proximity to target areas. The tactical flexibility that rapid strike capabilities provided transformed Space Marine operations from the methodical campaigns that had characterized much of the Great Crusade into dynamic operations, where the ability to redeploy quickly could prove more valuable than raw firepower. Land speeders exemplified this approach, their combination of speed and firepower allowing them to engage enemy forces and withdraw before effective countermeasures could be implemented. These fast attack vehicles operated according to hit-and-run tactics that disrupted enemy formations and reconnaissance efforts, while providing friendly forces with intelligence about enemy dispositions and movements. Land speeder operations required pilots trained in three-dimensional tactical thinking, as the vehicle's anti-gravity systems allowed them to utilize terrain features and altitude variations that ground-based vehicles could not exploit. Speeder crews learned to use buildings, rock formations, and vegetation as cover while maintaining the mobility necessary to avoid concentrated enemy fire. Their weapon systems, typically consisting of heavy bolters, assault cannons, or multi-meltas, provided firepower sufficient to engage light armor and infantry formations while remaining mobile enough to avoid retaliation from heavier enemy weapons. The coordination between different rapid strike elements created tactical opportunities that individual units could not achieve independently, with land speeders providing reconnaissance and harassment, while drop pods and Thunderhawks delivered concentrated force at decisive points. This integration required communication protocols that allowed real-time coordination between units operating at different speeds and altitudes, with land speeder crews serving as forward observers for orbital bombardment and airstrikes, while identifying targets for ground assault forces. Squad-level tactics formed the foundation upon which these larger coordination efforts depended, as the effectiveness of combined arms operations ultimately relied on individual squads' ability to accomplish their assigned missions while maintaining coordination with supporting elements. Tactical squads represented the most versatile component of Space Marine forces, their standard equipment loadout providing capabilities that could adapt to various combat situations without requiring specialized preparation or equipment modifications. The 10 Marine composition of tactical squads reflected optimal unit dynamics where every member could contribute effectively to squad operations, while maintaining the redundancy necessary to continue functioning after suffering casualties. The tactical squad's organization around a corps of 8 Marines, equipped with standard bolters, provided sustained firepower that could engage most enemy infantry formations effectively, while maintaining the ammunition reserves necessary for extended combat operations. The addition of 1 Marine carrying specialized weapons, such as a flamer, melt-a-gun, or plasma gun, allowed tactical squads to adapt their capabilities to specific threats without compromising their general purpose effectiveness. The squad's sergeant provided leadership and tactical coordination while carrying enhanced weapons and equipment that reflected his experience and responsibility for the squad's performance. Tactical squad deployment doctrine emphasized flexibility and mutual support, with squads typically operating in pairs or larger groups that could provide covering fire and tactical coordination during combat operations. The standard combat formation placed squads in positions where they could support each other with overlapping fields of fire, while maintaining the ability to maneuver independently if tactical situations required rapid redeployment. This coordination required extensive training in small unit tactics and communication procedures that allowed squad leaders to coordinate their actions without requiring constant direction from higher command levels. The specialization of assault and devastator squads provided capabilities that complemented tactical squads while addressing specific tactical requirements that general-purpose formations could not handle effectively. Assault squads equipped with jump packs and close combat weapons filled the role of shock troops whose rapid deployment and melee capabilities could break enemy formations and capture key objectives that ranged combat could not secure. The psychological impact of assault marines descending from above with chainswords screaming often proved as valuable as their actual combat effectiveness, as enemy forces frequently broke and fled rather than face the terrifying prospect of close combat with superhuman warriors. Assault squad tactics required extensive training in three-dimensional movement and close-quarters combat techniques that went far beyond standard Space Marine combat instruction. Jump pack operations demanded precise timing and coordination to avoid mid-air collisions, while maximizing the tactical advantage that aerial mobility provided. Assault Marines learned to use their jump packs not just for initial deployment, but for tactical repositioning during combat, allowing them to disengage from unfavorable situations and redeploy to more advantageous positions within seconds. The coordination between assault squads and other unit types created tactical opportunities that neither could achieve independently, with assault marines providing the close combat capability necessary to eliminate enemy forces that had taken cover from ranged weapons, while tactical squads provided covering fire and secured retreat routes. This integration required communication protocols that allowed real-time coordination between units operating at different ranges and using different tactical approaches, with assault squad leaders maintaining contact with supporting units while focusing on the immediate requirements of close combat operations. Devastator squads provided the heavy weapons support that allowed Space Marine formations to engage armored targets and fortified positions that standard bolter fire could not penetrate effectively. The squad's organization around 4 Marines carrying heavy weapons such as missile launchers, las cannons, or plasma cannons provided concentrated firepower that could destroy enemy vehicles and suppress enemy heavy weapons positions. The remaining squad members served as ammunition carriers and spotters, while providing security against enemy forces attempting to assault the heavy weapons positions. The deployment of Devastator squads required careful consideration of terrain features and fields of fire, as the squad's effectiveness depended on their ability to engage targets at long range while remaining protected from enemy counterfire. Devastator Marines typically occupied elevated positions or fortified locations that provided good visibility and protection, while allowing them to support advancing friendly forces with suppressing fire and precision strikes against high-value targets. The coordination between Devastator squads and advancing infantry required sophisticated target designation procedures that ensured heavy weapons fire supported friendly operations without creating friendly fire incidents. The battlefield coordination between different squad types created tactical synergies that multiplied the effectiveness of individual units while providing the flexibility necessary to adapt to changing combat situations. Tactical squads advanced under covering fire from Devastator squads, while assault squads positioned themselves to exploit opportunities created by the suppression of enemy defensive positions. This coordination required extensive training and communication procedures that allowed squad leaders to maintain tactical awareness of friendly positions and intentions while focusing on their immediate combat responsibilities. The adaptation principles embedded within Codex doctrine recognized that rigid adherence to standardized procedures could prove counterproductive when facing enemies or operating in environments that differed significantly from the conditions under which those procedures had been developed. Chapters operating from ice worlds developed modifications to standard equipment and tactics that addressed the unique challenges of Arctic warfare, while those recruited from desert worlds adapted their procedures to maximize effectiveness in arid environments where water conservation and heat management became critical tactical considerations. The homeworld's characteristics influenced not just equipment modifications, but fundamental approaches to tactical problems, with chapters from mountainous worlds developing expertise in vertical warfare and cliff assault techniques, while those from ocean worlds specialized in amphibious operations and underwater combat. These adaptations required careful integration with standard Codex procedures to ensure that specialized capabilities enhanced rather than replaced the fundamental tactical principles that made Space Marine operations effective across diverse operational environments. Enemy-specific adaptations represented another crucial aspect of tactical flexibility, as the galaxy's diverse threats required different approaches that standard procedures might not address adequately. Chapters that frequently engaged orc forces developed tactics that emphasized rapid deployment and concentrated firepower to counter the Greenskins' numerical advantages and aggressive assault tactics. Those facing Eldar raiders adapted their procedures to address the Xenos' superior mobility and sophisticated technology, developing counter-reconnaissance techniques and rapid response protocols that could match the aliens' tactical speed. The resource constraints that individual chapters faced required additional adaptations that balanced tactical effectiveness with logistical sustainability, as not every chapter possessed access to the full range of equipment and support assets that Codex doctrine assumed. Chapters operating far from major forge worlds developed maintenance procedures and equipment modifications that maximized the operational lifespan of critical systems while minimizing dependence on external supply lines. These adaptations often involved closer cooperation with local Mechanicus facilities and the development of alternative equipment sources that could provide adequate capability even when standard Imperial supply chains proved unreliable. The standardization of wargear patterns represented one of the Codex Astartes' most revolutionary concepts, transforming the chaotic diversity of Legion equipment into a unified system where any Space Marine could operate any chapter's weapons and armor with minimal adjustment. During the Great Crusade, individual legions had developed their own equipment preferences and modifications that reflected their Primarch's tactical doctrines and the specific forge worlds that supplied their forces. The Iron Hands favored extensive cybernetic modifications and advanced targeting systems that integrated with their mechanical augmentations, while the Salamanders crafted their own weapons using techniques that produced superior quality but prevented standardized mass production. This diversity had created logistical nightmares during joint operations, where Marines from different legions could not share ammunition, spare parts, or even basic equipment without extensive modification. The Mark VII Aquila pattern power armor emerged as the standard template that would equip the vast majority of Space Marines throughout the Imperium. Its design incorporating lessons learned from 6 previous marks, while establishing manufacturing specifications that forge worlds across the galaxy could reproduce consistently. The armor's distinctive eagle-winged chestplate served both ceremonial and practical purposes, its reinforced construction providing additional protection for vital organs, while displaying the Imperial Aquila that marked the wearer as the Emperor's chosen warrior. The helmet's enhanced auto-senses integrated seamlessly with the suit's machine spirit, providing tactical information, target identification, and communication capabilities that transformed each Marine into a walking command center, capable of coordinating with friendly forces across vast battlefields. The Mark VII's modular construction allowed for field repairs and component replacement without requiring specialized manufacturing facilities, a crucial advantage for chapters operating far from major forge worlds. The armor's ceramite plates could be removed and replaced individually, while the underlying power systems used standardized components that tech marines could maintain using tools and spare parts available throughout the Imperium. This modularity extended to weapon mounting points and equipment attachment systems that allowed Marines to modify their loadouts for specific missions without compromising the armor's protective capabilities or power distribution networks. The sacred maintenance rituals required for power armor upkeep reflected the fusion of religious devotion and technical necessity that characterized the Imperium's relationship with technology. Each suit housed a machine spirit that required daily prayers and incense offerings to maintain its cooperation with the wearer, while the physical components demanded meticulous cleaning, lubrication, and calibration procedures that could take several hours to complete properly. Tech Marines supervised these rituals while training battle brothers in the proper techniques for field maintenance, their knowledge of the Omnissiah's mysteries ensuring that each suit received the spiritual attention necessary to function at peak efficiency. The morning ritual of armor sanctification began before dawn in most fortress monasteries, with Marines gathering in the armory to perform the litanies of awakening that roused their suits' machine spirits from their dormant state. Sacred oils blessed by the chapter's chaplains were applied to joint mechanisms and power coupling points, while specific prayers addressed the armor's various systems: the auto senses, the atmospheric recycling units, the targeting cogitators, and the pain suppressors that allowed wounded Marines to continue fighting despite grievous injuries. These rituals served practical purposes beyond their spiritual significance, as the regular inspection and maintenance they required often identified potential equipment failures before they could compromise mission effectiveness. The standardization of bolter patterns proved equally crucial to the Codex's implementation, as the diversity of bolt weapon variants that had proliferated during the Great Crusade created ammunition compatibility issues that could prove fatal during extended campaigns. The Mark II Godwin pattern bolter became the template for standardized production, its robust construction and reliable feeding mechanism making it suitable for the harsh conditions that Space Marines routinely encountered. The weapon's mass reactive bolt shells were standardized to .75 caliber specifications that allowed any chapter's ammunition to function in any other chapter's weapons, eliminating the logistical complications that had plagued inter-legion cooperation during the Heresy. The bolter's design incorporated lessons learned from 2 centuries of combat across thousands of different worlds and against every conceivable type of enemy. The weapon's gyroscopic stabilization systems allowed accurate fire even while the user moved at full sprint, while the magazine's 30-round capacity provided sustained firepower without requiring frequent reloading during intense combat. The bolt shells themselves contained micro-cogitators that guided them to their targets and mass reactive tips that detonated after penetrating enemy armor, creating devastating wounds that could incapacitate even heavily protected opponents with single hits. Specialized bolter variants addressed specific tactical requirements while maintaining compatibility with standard ammunition and maintenance procedures. Storm bolters provided increased rate of fire for close-range engagements, their twin barrels allowing Marines to lay down suppressing fire that could pin enemy forces in place, while friendly units maneuvered for advantageous positions. Combi weapons integrated bolters with flamers, meltaguns, or plasma guns, creating versatile weapon systems that could adapt to different tactical situations without requiring Marines to carry multiple weapons into combat. The sacred nature of Space Marine weapons extended beyond their practical function to encompass their role as symbols of the Emperor's divine authority and the chapter's martial traditions. Each bolter bore the names of previous users etched into its receiver, creating a lineage of service that connected current Marines to the heroes of past campaigns. Weaponsmiths within each chapter's armory maintained detailed records of each weapon's service history, documenting notable kills and battlefield achievements that added to the weapon's spiritual significance and tactical reputation. Heavy weapons allocation among Devastator squads required careful consideration of tactical requirements and resource availability, as these powerful systems represented significant investments in both manufacturing resources and specialized training. Las cannons provided the precision firepower necessary to engage heavily armored targets at extreme range, their focused energy beams capable of penetrating even land raider armor when properly aimed. The weapon's sophisticated targeting systems integrated with the user's helmet displays to provide ballistic calculations and range estimation, while the power pack's capacity allowed for sustained fire during prolonged engagements. The tactical application of las cannons required extensive training in target identification and engagement priorities, as the weapon's limited ammunition capacity meant that every shot had to count toward achieving tactical objectives. Devastator Marines learned to identify weak points in enemy armor and coordinate their fire to achieve maximum damage, with multiple las cannon hits often concentrated on single targets to ensure complete destruction rather than spreading damage across multiple enemies. The weapon's range advantage allowed Devastator squads to engage enemy armor before it could close to effective range with its own weapons, providing friendly forces with crucial fire support during defensive operations. Heavy bolters offered different tactical advantages through their sustained rate of fire and armor-penetrating capabilities, their ability to lay down continuous streams of bolt shells, making them invaluable for suppressing enemy infantry and light vehicles. The weapon's belt-fed ammunition system allowed for extended firing periods without reloading, while its gyroscopic mounting systems provided stability that maintained accuracy even during rapid traverse movements. Heavy bolter crews trained extensively in target engagement techniques that maximized the weapon's suppressive effects, learning to coordinate their fire with advancing friendly forces to pin enemy units in place, while assault elements closed for decisive engagement. Missile launchers provided versatility that other heavy weapons could not match, their ability to fire different warhead types allowing Devastator squads to adapt their firepower to various tactical situations without changing weapons. Frag missiles delivered area effect explosions that could devastate enemy infantry formations, while crack missiles provided armor-penetrating capabilities that could destroy enemy vehicles and fortifications. The weapon's targeting systems allowed for both direct fire against visible enemies and indirect fire against targets designated by forward observers, creating tactical flexibility that multiplied the squad's effectiveness across different combat scenarios. The coordination between different heavy weapons types created tactical synergies that enhanced the overall effectiveness of Devastator squads, while providing the flexibility necessary to engage diverse threats simultaneously. Las cannon teams engaged the heaviest enemy armor, while heavy bolter crews suppressed supporting infantry, creating opportunities for missile launcher operators to target medium armor and fortified positions with appropriate warhead types. This coordination required extensive training in target identification and engagement priorities, with squad leaders learning to direct their weapons against the threats that posed the greatest danger to friendly forces while maintaining the sustained firepower necessary to support ongoing operations. Vehicle doctrines represented another crucial aspect of Codex standardization, transforming the diverse collection of armored vehicles that had served the legions into a unified fleet of standardized designs that could be produced, maintained, and operated according to consistent procedures across all chapters. The Rhino armored personnel carrier became the foundation of Space Marine mechanized operations, its robust construction and reliable systems making it capable of transporting tactical squads across hostile terrain while providing protection against enemy fire. The vehicle's troop compartment could accommodate a full 10 Marine squad with their equipment, while the forward-mounted Storm Bolter provided suppressive fire capability that could clear landing zones and cover dismounting troops. The Rhino's modular design allowed for field modifications that adapted the basic chassis to different tactical roles without requiring entirely new vehicle types. The Razorback variant traded passenger capacity for enhanced firepower, mounting twin-linked heavy bolters, las cannons, or assault cannons in a turret that could engage enemy forces while transporting smaller squads to their objectives. These modifications used standardized components that Tech Marines could install and maintain using existing tools and procedures, creating tactical flexibility without increasing logistical complexity. Predator tanks provided the fire support capabilities that infantry formations required when facing heavily armored enemies or fortified positions, their main armament options allowing commanders to configure the vehicles for different tactical roles. The Predator Annihilator mounted twin-linked lascannons and lascannon sponsons that could engage the heaviest enemy armor at long range, while the Predator Destructor's autocannon and heavy bolter sponsons provided rapid-fire capability against lighter vehicles and infantry formations. The tank's advanced targeting systems integrated with chapter communication networks to coordinate fire missions and share tactical intelligence across different unit types. The strategic deployment of Predator tanks required careful consideration of terrain features and tactical objectives, as the vehicle's effectiveness depended on its ability to engage targets from advantageous positions while remaining protected from enemy counterfire. Tank commanders received extensive training in terrain analysis and positioning techniques that maximized their weapons' effectiveness while minimizing exposure to enemy anti-armor weapons. The coordination between Predator tanks and infantry units created combined arms capabilities that multiplied the effectiveness of both unit types while providing tactical flexibility that neither could achieve independently. Land Raiders represented the pinnacle of Space Marine armored warfare, their combination of transport capacity, firepower, and protection making them capable of spearheading assaults against the most heavily defended objectives. The standard Land Raiders' twin-linked lascannons and heavy bolter provided devastating firepower, while its ceramite armor could withstand direct hits from most enemy weapons. The vehicle's transport compartment could carry a full tactical squad or a smaller number of Terminators, allowing it to deliver assault forces directly to their objectives while providing fire support throughout the engagement. The Land Raider Crusader variant adapted the basic design for close assault operations, replacing the lascannons with twin-linked assault cannons and adding hurricane bolter arrays that could devastate enemy infantry at close range. The vehicle's enlarged transport compartment could accommodate larger assault forces, while its frag assault launchers provided additional close-range firepower that could clear enemy positions immediately before disembarkation. These modifications created a vehicle specifically designed for urban warfare and assault operations, where sustained firepower proved more valuable than long-range precision. Specialized equipment for different battlefield roles reflected the Codex's recognition that Space Marine operations required capabilities that standard equipment could not provide effectively. Jump packs transformed assault marines into three-dimensional combatants capable of rapid deployment and tactical repositioning that could exploit enemy weaknesses and create tactical opportunities that ground-bound forces could not achieve. The Jump pack's Promethium-fueled engines provided sufficient thrust to carry a fully armored marine across significant distances while maintaining the maneuverability necessary for combat operations in complex terrain. The tactical employment of Jump pack-equipped Marines required extensive training in aerial maneuvering and three-dimensional combat techniques that went far beyond standard Space Marine instruction. Assault Marines learned to coordinate their movements to avoid mid-air collisions while maintaining unit cohesion during complex maneuvers, their training encompassing everything from basic flight procedures to advanced combat techniques that utilized vertical terrain features and aerial positioning advantages. The psychological impact of Marines descending from above with chainswords and bolt pistols often proved as valuable as their actual combat capabilities, as enemy forces frequently broke and fled rather than face close combat with airborne superhuman warriors. Terminator armor represented the ultimate expression of Space Marine protective technology, its massive construction and sophisticated systems creating walking fortresses that could operate in the most hostile environments while delivering devastating firepower. The armor's thick ceramite plates and adamantium framework could withstand direct hits from lascannons and plasma weapons, while the integrated life support systems allowed operation in vacuum, toxic atmospheres, or areas contaminated by radiation or biological weapons. The suit's power systems provided strength enhancement that allowed the wearer to carry and operate weapons that would be impossible for unaugmented Marines to handle effectively. The sacred nature of Terminator armor meant that each suit represented an irreplaceable relic whose loss would diminish the chapter's capabilities for generations. The armor's machine's spirit bore the imprints of previous wearers and their battlefield experiences, creating a repository of tactical knowledge and combat wisdom that enhanced the current user's effectiveness. The ritual of donning Terminator armor involved extensive preparation and neural interface calibration that could take hours to complete, making the suits impractical for rapid deployment operations, but invaluable for planned assaults where their enhanced protection and firepower could prove decisive. Scout equipment addressed the unique requirements of reconnaissance and infiltration operations that required different capabilities than standard power armor could provide. Scout armor offered enhanced mobility and stealth characteristics that allowed young Marines to move undetected through hostile territory while maintaining the protection necessary for survival in combat situations. The armor's simplified systems reduced maintenance requirements while providing the auto-senses and communication capabilities that scouts needed to gather intelligence and coordinate with other friendly forces. The specialized weapons carried by Scout Marines reflected their role as reconnaissance specialists and long-range marksmen rather than assault troops. Sniper rifles provided precision firepower that could eliminate key enemy personnel from extreme range, while shotguns offered close-range stopping power for situations where stealth operations turned into direct combat. The coordination between scout squads and battle companies created tactical intelligence networks that enhanced the effectiveness of major operations, while providing early warning of enemy movements and intentions. The sacred process of recruiting aspirants from chapter homeworlds begins with the identification of candidates who possess not merely physical prowess, but the rare genetic compatibility required for successful gene seed implantation. The selection trials vary dramatically between different chapters and their recruiting worlds, yet all follow fundamental principles established within the Codex Astartes that ensure only the most suitable candidates advance to the preliminary stages of transformation. On the ice world of Fenris, young warriors must survive the brutal trials of the Chooser of the Slain, where they face genetically modified beasts and environmental hazards that would kill ordinary humans within minutes. The death world of Baal subjects its aspirants to radiation storms and mutant predators that test not only combat ability, but the psychological fortitude necessary to face the galaxy's horrors without succumbing to madness or despair. The genetic screening process represents the most crucial element of recruitment, as the Adeptus Astartes gene seed will only successfully integrate with candidates who possess specific genetic markers inherited from the original Space Marine legions. Apothecaries conduct extensive blood analysis and genetic sequencing that can take weeks to complete, examining chromosomal structures and protein sequences that determine compatibility with the 19 different organ implants that will transform the aspirant into a superhuman warrior. The rejection rate often exceeds 90%, as even minor genetic variations can cause catastrophic immune responses that result in the candidate's death during the implantation process. Chapter recruiting worlds typically maintain populations that have been exposed to Space Marine gene seed for millennia, creating genetic pools where compatibility rates prove significantly higher than those found among general Imperial populations. The planet Macragge produces aspirants with exceptional compatibility to Ultramarines gene seed, their genetic heritage tracing back to the original settlers who accompanied Roboute Guilliman during the world's initial colonization. These hereditary advantages explain why many chapters maintain exclusive recruiting rights over specific worlds, as the genetic investment required to develop suitable populations represents centuries of careful breeding programs and genetic monitoring. The trials themselves serve multiple purposes beyond simple selection, as they begin the psychological conditioning process that will eventually transform ordinary humans into the Emperor's Angels of Death. Aspirants face challenges designed to break down civilian thought patterns and replace them with the warrior mindset necessary for effective Space Marine operations. the Blood Angels trials on Bal Secundus Force candidates to survive in irradiated wastelands where they must hunt mutant creatures using improvised weapons, developing the predatory instincts and tactical thinking that will prove essential during their service as battle brothers. The duration of recruitment trials varies between chapters based on their specific traditions and the characteristics of their homeworlds, but most extend for several months to ensure adequate psychological evaluation and physical conditioning. The Imperial Fists conduct their trials within the fortress monastery of the Phalanx itself, subjecting aspirants to zero-gravity combat scenarios and void survival exercises that prepare them for the ship-based operations that characterize much of the chapter's activities. These extended trials allow chapter officials to observe candidates under various stress conditions, while identifying leadership potential and specialized aptitudes that will influence their eventual assignment to different companies and tactical roles. Scout training protocols begin immediately upon successful completion of recruitment trials, as the young aspirants undergo the first stages of gene seed implantation while learning the fundamental skills that will define their service as Space Marines. The secondary heart implant typically occurs first, its installation requiring several weeks of recovery during which the aspirant's cardiovascular system adapts to the enhanced blood flow and oxygenation that the additional organ provides. This initial augmentation allows for more intensive physical training regimens that would prove fatal to unaugmented humans, as the dual heart system provides the enhanced endurance necessary for the grueling conditioning programs that follow. The os medulla implant follows several months later, its hormone secretions beginning the process of skeletal reinforcement and muscle development that will eventually produce the superhuman strength characteristic of fully developed Space Marines. The implant's integration requires careful monitoring by chapter apothecaries, as improper development can result in bone deformities or muscular imbalances that would compromise the aspirant's combat effectiveness. The physical changes during this period prove dramatic, with aspirants gaining significant height and muscle mass, while their skeletal structure adapts to support the enhanced musculature and the weight of power armor that they will eventually wear. Stealth operations training begins during the early stages of scout development, as these young Marines serve as the chapter's reconnaissance specialists before earning the right to join the battle companies. Scout squads learn to move silently through hostile territory using camouflaging cloaks and sound-dampening techniques that allow them to approach enemy positions undetected. The training encompasses everything from basic fieldcraft and camouflage to advanced infiltration techniques that enable scouts to penetrate heavily guarded facilities and gather intelligence on enemy dispositions and capabilities. The psychological aspects of stealth training prove as important as the technical skills, as scouts must learn to suppress the aggressive instincts that their gene seed modifications naturally enhance. The ability to remain motionless for hours while observing enemy positions requires discipline that conflicts with the enhanced metabolism and heightened reflexes that Space Marine augmentations provide. Scout sergeants, typically veterans who have served in the battle companies for decades before returning to train new recruits, teach patience and tactical thinking that emphasize mission accomplishment over personal glory or immediate action. Marksmanship training with bolt pistols and sniper rifles develops the precision shooting skills that scouts require for their reconnaissance and elimination missions. The sniper rifle represents a significant departure from the rapid-fire weapons that most Space Marines carry, its single-shot precision requiring different techniques and mental approaches than the sustained firepower tactics employed by tactical squads. Scout marksmen learn to calculate range, wind speed, and target movement, while accounting for the enhanced reflexes and reaction times that their augmented physiology provides. The coordination between scout squads and battle companies requires extensive communication training that teaches young Marines to gather and transmit tactical intelligence effectively. Scouts learn to operate sophisticated Vox equipment and data-gathering devices that allow them to relay enemy positions, strength estimates, and movement patterns to friendly forces without compromising their concealed positions. This intelligence-gathering capability makes scout squads invaluable assets during major operations, as their advanced reconnaissance can identify enemy weaknesses and deployment patterns that influence the tactical planning for subsequent assault phases. Reconnaissance missions provide scouts with their first exposure to actual combat operations, though their role emphasizes observation and intelligence gathering rather than direct engagement with enemy forces. Scout squads deploy days or weeks ahead of main battle forces, establishing concealed observation posts that monitor enemy activities and identify high-value targets for elimination or capture. These extended deployments in hostile territory develop the self-reliance and tactical judgment that scouts will need when they eventually advance to the battle companies and assume greater combat responsibilities. The gradual introduction to Space Marine warfare occurs through carefully planned training exercises that expose scouts to different combat scenarios while maintaining the supervision necessary to prevent unnecessary casualties among these valuable recruits. Mock battles against servitor targets and holographic enemies allow scouts to practice the coordination and communication skills they will need during actual combat operations, while live-fire exercises with reduced power ammunition provide realistic training without the lethal consequences of full-scale combat. These training programs gradually increase in complexity and intensity as the scouts demonstrate improved competence and tactical understanding. Progressive advancement through the ranks follows a carefully structured timeline that ensures each Marine receives adequate training and experience before assuming greater responsibilities within the chapter hierarchy. The transition from scout to full battle brother typically occurs after several years of service in the 10th Company, during which the aspirant receives the remaining gene seed implants that complete his transformation into a Space Marine. The Black Carapace implant represents the final and most crucial augmentation, its neural interface systems allowing the Marine to operate power armor effectively while providing the enhanced coordination and reaction times that make Space Marines so formidable in combat. The implantation of gene seed organs follows a precise schedule developed through millennia of experience, as the timing of each procedure affects the success rate and final effectiveness of the augmentations. The Biscopia implant enhances muscle development and provides the strength necessary to operate Space Marine weapons and equipment, while the Hemastamen improves blood clotting and toxin resistance that allows Marines to continue fighting despite wounds that would incapacitate ordinary humans. Each implant requires weeks or months of recovery time, during which the recipient's physiology adapts to the new organ's functions and integrates its capabilities with existing biological systems. Psychological conditioning accompanies the physical transformation process, as the mental adjustments required to function as a Space Marine prove as significant as the biological changes. The catalepsian node implant allows Marines to remain conscious and alert during extended operations by enabling micro-sleep cycles that provide rest without compromising tactical awareness. This capability requires extensive training to master, as Marines must learn to coordinate their enhanced sleep patterns with operational requirements while maintaining the vigilance necessary for survival in hostile environments. The Susan membrane provides emergency survival capabilities that can preserve a Marine's life during catastrophic injuries, but its activation requires specific mental techniques that must be learned through careful instruction and practice. Marines train to recognize the physiological signs that indicate when membrane activation becomes necessary, while learning the meditation techniques that can trigger the suspended animation state voluntarily. This training often involves controlled exposure to near-fatal injuries under medical supervision, allowing Marines to experience the membrane's effects while ensuring their survival through immediate medical intervention. Specialized training paths for veterans begin to emerge during a Marine's service in the battle companies, as individual Marines demonstrate particular aptitudes or interests that make them suitable for advanced roles within the chapter structure. Veterans who show exceptional tactical acumen and leadership ability may receive additional training that prepares them for eventual promotion to sergeant or officer positions. This advanced instruction encompasses strategic planning, logistics coordination, and the complex decision-making processes required for independent command during combat operations. The selection criteria for veteran status extend beyond simple combat prowess to include demonstrated reliability, tactical innovation, and the ability to inspire confidence in other Marines during difficult situations. Veterans typically have survived multiple major campaigns and shown the kind of steady performance under pressure that marks true warriors rather than mere fighters. Their advancement to the first company represents recognition of their expertise and commitment, while providing them with access to the chapter's most sacred weapons and ancient suits of Terminator armor. Sergeant training programs prepare selected veterans for the responsibilities of squad leadership, teaching them the communication skills and tactical knowledge necessary to coordinate 10 Marine units during complex operations. Prospective sergeants study the histories of famous battles and analyze tactical decisions made by legendary commanders, learning to recognize patterns and principles that can guide their own decision-making processes. The training emphasizes practical leadership skills, such as maintaining unit morale, coordinating with supporting elements, and adapting to unexpected tactical developments that require immediate responses. Cross-training with other Imperial institutions provides chapter officers with broader perspectives on warfare and politics that prove valuable during joint operations and diplomatic missions. Selected Marines receive instruction at Imperial Guard command schools, where they learn to coordinate with conventional military forces and understand the capabilities and limitations of non-Astartes formations. This training creates mutual understanding between different military branches while providing Space Marine commanders with the knowledge necessary to integrate their operations with larger Imperial military efforts. The Schola Progenium provides another avenue for advanced military education, as selected Space Marines attend courses alongside future commissars and Imperial Guard officers. These programs focus on strategic planning, logistics management, and the political considerations that influence military decision-making at the highest levels. Marines who complete Schola Progenium instruction often assume roles as chapter liaisons to other Imperial institutions or serve as advisors during major campaigns that require coordination between multiple military organizations. Naval cross-training programs prepare selected Marines for service aboard chapter fleet vessels and coordination with Imperial Navy squadrons during void warfare operations. These Marines learn to operate ship-based weapon systems, coordinate boarding actions, and understand the complex three-dimensional tactics that characterize space combat. Their expertise proves invaluable during fleet operations, where Space Marine strike cruisers and battle barges must coordinate with Navy vessels to achieve tactical objectives, while maintaining the mobility necessary for rapid deployment to different theaters of operation. The gene seed represents humanity's most sacred biological inheritance, a collection of genetic modifications derived from the Emperor's own genetic template and refined through the unique physiological characteristics of each Primarch. These microscopic organs contain the accumulated genetic wisdom of the Great Crusade, encoding not merely the biological instructions for creating superhuman warriors, but the very essence of what separates the Adeptus Astartes from ordinary humanity. Each gene seed carries within its cellular structure the genetic memory of its Primarch's capabilities, creating Space Marines who inherit not just enhanced physical abilities, but subtle psychological traits and tactical preferences that echo their gene father's approach to warfare. The 19 distinct organ implants that comprise the complete gene seed package represent the culmination of the Emperor's genetic engineering mastery, each serving specific functions that transform human physiology into something capable of surviving the galaxy's countless horrors. The secondary heart provides the enhanced cardiovascular capacity necessary for sustained combat operations, its redundant circulation systems ensuring that Space Marines can continue fighting even after suffering wounds that would prove fatal to ordinary humans. This additional organ beats independently of the primary heart, creating blood flow patterns that maximize oxygen delivery to enhanced muscle tissue, while providing backup circulation if the original heart suffers damage during combat. The osmodula fundamentally restructures skeletal development through hormone secretions that strengthen bone density, while directing growth patterns that accommodate the enhanced musculature and organ systems that subsequent implants will provide. The implant's integration begins during adolescence when the recipient's skeletal structure remains malleable enough to accept the dramatic changes that Space Marine physiology requires. The hormone cocktail produces bones with tensile strength approaching that of plasteel, while maintaining the flexibility necessary for rapid movement and combat maneuvers. The growth process typically adds significant height and frame size, with most Space Marines reaching physical dimensions that dwarf even the largest unaugmented humans. The biscopia works in conjunction with the osmodula to develop the enhanced musculature that gives Space Marines their legendary strength and endurance capabilities. This implant secretes growth hormones and protein synthesis catalysts that direct muscle development along predetermined patterns encoded within the gene seed's genetic structure. The resulting muscle fibers possess density and contractile force that allows fully developed Space Marines to crush human skulls with their bare hands while maintaining the fine motor control necessary for precision weapon handling and delicate technical operations. The biscopia's influence extends beyond simple strength enhancement to include improved reaction times and coordination that make Space Marines capable of combat maneuvers impossible for unaugmented humans. The hemostamen transforms blood chemistry through the introduction of specialized cells that enhance clotting factors and toxin resistance while improving oxygen carrying capacity beyond normal human parameters. The implant produces modified hemoglobin variants that can extract oxygen from atmospheric compositions that would prove lethal to ordinary humans, allowing Space Marines to operate in toxic environments or damaged life support systems without requiring external breathing apparatus. The enhanced clotting factors enable Space Marines to survive wounds that would cause fatal blood loss in normal humans, with minor injuries sealing themselves within minutes and major trauma requiring significantly longer to prove incapacitating. The Laramens organ represents one of the most visible manifestations of Space Marine physiology, its rapid response to tissue damage, creating the distinctive scar patterns that mark veteran warriors. When activated by injury, the organ releases specialized cells that form temporary organic patches over wounds, sealing damaged blood vessels and preventing infection, while natural healing processes repair the underlying damage. These Laramen cells create distinctive white scar tissue that remains permanently visible, marking each Space Marine's combat history across his skin in a pattern unique to his service record and battlefield experiences. The catalepsian node provides the sleep regulation capabilities that allow Space Marines to maintain operational effectiveness during extended campaigns where normal rest cycles would prove impossible. The implant enables conscious control over sleep patterns, allowing Marines to enter restorative microsleep states while remaining alert to potential threats and maintaining basic motor functions. This capability proves invaluable during siege operations or extended void voyages, where Marines must remain at combat readiness for weeks or months without traditional rest periods. The node's activation requires specific mental techniques that Marines learn during their scout training, with mastery of these procedures marking the transition from aspirant to full battle brother. The preomner serves as a preliminary digestive chamber that neutralizes toxins and breaks down substances that would prove harmful to normal human physiology. This pre-stomach can process materials that ordinary humans could never consume, allowing Space Marines to derive nutrition from sources as diverse as tree bark, industrial lubricants, or even certain types of plastic compounds when standard rations become unavailable. The preomner's chemical analysis capabilities also enable Space Marines to identify poisons and other hazardous substances through taste, providing early warning systems that can prevent assassination attempts or accidental ingestion of dangerous materials. The omophagia grants Space Marines the ability to absorb memories and genetic information from consumed organic material, creating intelligence-gathering capabilities that prove invaluable during reconnaissance operations. By consuming small amounts of brain tissue from deceased enemies, Marines can access recent memories that reveal enemy plans, facility layouts, or the locations of hidden resources and personnel. This capability requires careful application, as the absorption of alien genetic material carries risks of contamination or psychological disturbance that can compromise the Marines' effectiveness or loyalty to the Imperium. The multi-lung provides atmospheric adaptation capabilities that allow Space Marines to operate in environments where normal human respiration would prove impossible. This third lung can extract oxygen from water, filter out toxic gases, or operate independently when the primary respiratory system suffers damage from chemical weapons or physical trauma. The multi-lung's sophisticated filtration systems can neutralize most airborne toxins while providing the enhanced oxygen processing necessary to support the Space Marines' augmented metabolism and physical capabilities. The oculobe transforms visual capabilities through modifications to the eye structure that provide enhanced light gathering, improved resolution, and resistance to blinding effects that would incapacitate ordinary humans. The implant enables Space Marines to see clearly in near total darkness, while protecting against flashbang grenades and laser dazzlers that enemy forces commonly employ. The enhanced visual acuity allows Marines to identify targets at extreme ranges and detect subtle movement patterns that might indicate concealed enemies or environmental hazards. The lineman's ear provides auditory enhancements that complement the oculobe's visual improvements, creating sensory capabilities that transform Space Marines into living detection systems. The implant enables conscious control over hearing sensitivity, allowing Marines to filter out background noise while focusing on specific sounds such as enemy communications or the distinctive mechanical signatures of different vehicle types. The enhanced hearing can detect subsonic vibrations that indicate approaching aircraft or heavy vehicles, while providing balance improvements that enhance combat effectiveness in zero-gravity environments. The Susan membrane represents the most dramatic of the gene seed organs, providing emergency survival capabilities that can preserve a Space Marine's life during otherwise fatal injuries. When activated by extreme trauma or conscious will, the membrane induces a state of suspended animation that dramatically slows metabolic processes while maintaining minimal life support functions. Marines in Susan coma can survive for decades without food or water, their bodies preserved in near-death states until medical attention becomes available or environmental conditions improve sufficiently to allow revival. The melanchromic organ enables adaptive camouflage through conscious control over skin pigmentation, allowing Space Marines to blend with their surroundings during stealth operations. The color changes occur gradually over several hours, making this capability useful for long-term concealment rather than rapid tactical adaptation. The organ responds to both conscious direction and unconscious environmental stimuli, with some Marines developing automatic camouflage responses that activate during periods of extended immobility or stress. The oolitic kidney provides enhanced filtration capabilities that complement the multi-lung's atmospheric processing while improving the Space Marine's ability to survive in hostile environments. This additional kidney can process toxins that would overwhelm normal human physiology while recycling body fluids with efficiency that allows Marines to operate for extended periods without external water sources. The organ's sophisticated filtration systems can extract useful substances from contaminated water sources while eliminating harmful compounds that might compromise the Marine's health or combat effectiveness. The neuroglottis enhances the omophagia's memory absorption capabilities while providing additional chemical analysis functions through taste and smell. The implant enables Space Marines to identify specific chemical compounds through minimal exposure, creating detection capabilities that can reveal the presence of explosives, drugs, or other substances that might indicate enemy activity or environmental hazards. The neuroglottis also enhances the absorption of genetic memories, allowing more complete extraction of information from consumed organic material. The mucranoid provides chemical protection through the secretion of specialized compounds that coat the skin and respiratory passages with substances that neutralize acids, bases, and other corrosive materials. The implant activates automatically when sensors detect dangerous chemical concentrations, creating protective barriers that allow Space Marines to operate in environments that would dissolve ordinary protective equipment. The mucranoid's secretions can also provide limited protection against radiation exposure, though extended operations in highly radioactive environments still require additional protective measures. The Becher's gland enables the production of highly corrosive acid that Space Marines can spit with considerable accuracy and range. The acid proves capable of dissolving most metals and organic compounds, creating a weapon that remains available even when the Marine has been stripped of conventional armaments. The gland's activation requires conscious control to prevent accidental discharge, with Marines learning specific techniques for directing the acid stream toward intended targets while avoiding contamination of their own equipment or friendly personnel. The progenid glands represent the most crucial organs for chapter survival, as these paired implants produce the gene seed that enables the creation of new Space Marines. The neck-mounted progenid matures after 5 years of implantation and can be harvested without killing the host, while the chest-mounted gland requires 10 years to reach maturity and can only be extracted after the Marine's death. These glands accumulate genetic information throughout the Marine's service, incorporating battle experience and environmental adaptations that enhance the effectiveness of future generations while maintaining the genetic stability necessary for successful implantation. The black carapace serves as the interface between Space Marine physiology and power armor systems, its neural connections and monitoring ports creating seamless integration between biological and mechanical components. The carapace's installation represents the final stage of Space Marine transformation, its neural interfaces providing the enhanced coordination and reaction times that make power armor operation possible. The implant monitors vital signs and physiological status while managing power distribution and system coordination that allows Marines to operate their armor as naturally as their own bodies. The harvesting protocols for gene seed recovery represent sacred duties that fall primarily to chapter apothecaries, whose specialized training and equipment enable them to extract the precious organs without contamination or genetic degradation. The process requires sophisticated medical equipment and sterile conditions that can prove difficult to maintain during active combat operations, yet the recovery of gene seed from fallen battle brothers remains a priority that supersedes most other tactical considerations. Apothecaries carry specialized tools including the reductor, a combination surgical implement and genetic scanner that can extract progenid glands while verifying their viability for future implantation. The timing of gene seed harvest proves crucial to maintaining genetic integrity, as the organs begin to deteriorate rapidly after the host's death unless preserved through specific procedures that halt cellular breakdown. The neck progenid can be harvested from living Marines during routine medical examinations, providing a renewable source of gene seed that allows chapters to maintain recruitment programs without depending entirely on battle casualties. The chest progenid typically provides higher quality genetic material due to its longer maturation period, but its extraction requires the Marine's death, making these organs available only through combat losses or the natural death of elderly veterans. Storage procedures for harvested gene seed involve cryogenic preservation systems that maintain cellular integrity across centuries or millennia of storage. Chapter armories contain specialized vaults where thousands of gene seed samples rest in suspended animation, their genetic patterns monitored by sophisticated scanning systems that detect signs of degradation or mutation. The storage facilities require constant maintenance and power supply, making them priority targets for enemy forces seeking to cripple a chapter's long-term viability. The loss of gene seed stores can prove more devastating than battlefield casualties, as it eliminates the chapter's ability to replace losses and continue operations across multiple generations. Quality control measures for gene seed purity involve extensive genetic analysis that identifies mutations, contamination, or degradation that might compromise successful implantation. Apothecaries conduct detailed examinations of each harvested organ, comparing its genetic patterns against template samples maintained from the chapter's founding stock. Minor variations within acceptable parameters can be corrected through genetic therapy or selective breeding programs, while major deviations require the destruction of contaminated samples to prevent the spread of genetic instability throughout the chapter's gene seed reserves. The implantation process itself represents a complex medical procedure that requires months of careful preparation and monitoring to ensure successful integration of the gene seed organs with the recipient's physiology. Apothecaries begin with extensive genetic compatibility testing that identifies candidates whose natural physiology provides the best foundation for space marine augmentation. The surgical procedures follow precise protocols developed through millennia of experience, with each implant requiring specific timing and preparation to maximize integration success while minimizing rejection risks. Rejection phenomena can manifest in various forms ranging from simple immune responses that prevent organ integration to catastrophic autoimmune reactions that prove fatal within hours of implantation. The most common rejection patterns involve the recipient's immune system attacking the implanted organs as foreign tissue, requiring immunosuppressive treatments that can compromise the candidate's ability to survive the transformation process. More severe reactions can trigger systemic failures that affect multiple organ systems simultaneously, creating medical emergencies that even experienced apothecaries struggle to address successfully. Mutation tracking represents an ongoing challenge that requires constant vigilance from chapter medical staff, as the complex genetic modifications that create space marines remain vulnerable to various forms of degradation and contamination. Chaos corruption represents the most dangerous threat to gene seed integrity, as exposure to warp energies can introduce random mutations that compromise both individual marines and the genetic legacy they will pass to future generations. The effects of chaos taint often remain dormant for years or decades before manifesting as physical deformities, psychological instabilities, or loss of specific organ functions. Environmental factors can also contribute to gene seed degradation through radiation exposure, chemical contamination, or prolonged exposure to alien influences that introduce foreign genetic elements into the space marine's cellular structure. Chapters operating in particularly hazardous environments often experience higher rates of genetic drift, requiring more frequent genetic screening and more aggressive culling of contaminated gene seed stocks. The cumulative effects of environmental damage can gradually reduce a chapter's recruitment success rates while increasing the likelihood of birth defects or organ failures among new Marines. The stabilization techniques employed to maintain gene seed purity involve both technological solutions and careful breeding programs that preserve genetic integrity across multiple generations. Advanced medical facilities can employ genetic therapy to repair minor mutations while reinforcing the cellular structures that maintain organ function. Selective recruitment from genetically compatible populations helps maintain the baseline human genetics that provide optimal foundations for space marine transformation, while careful monitoring of environmental factors reduces the accumulation of harmful mutations. Purity testing protocols require regular genetic analysis of both active Marines and stored gene seed samples to identify developing problems before they compromise chapter operations. The testing procedures involve sophisticated genetic sequencing that compares current samples against archived templates from the chapter's founding, identifying variations that might indicate mutation or degradation. The frequency of testing depends on environmental factors and the chapter's operational history, with formations that have experienced significant chaos exposure requiring more frequent monitoring than those operating in relatively stable regions. The long-term consequences of genetic drift extend beyond simple recruitment difficulties to encompass fundamental changes in chapter capabilities and characteristics that can alter their tactical effectiveness and cultural identity. Chapters that experience significant gene seed degradation may lose specific organ functions that reduce their combat effectiveness or environmental adaptability. The gradual accumulation of mutations can also affect psychological traits and behavioral patterns, creating subtle changes in chapter culture and tactical preferences that may not become apparent until several generations of recruitment have passed. Replacement protocols for degraded gene seed stocks involve complex negotiations with other chapters or direct intervention by the Adeptus Mechanicus to provide genetic material that can restore recruitment capabilities. The process requires careful matching of genetic templates to ensure compatibility while maintaining the recipient chapter's distinctive characteristics and traditions. In extreme cases, chapters may require complete genetic reconstruction using archived samples from their founding stock, effectively creating new Marines who lack the accumulated genetic experience of their predecessors, but possess the pure gene seed necessary for long-term survival. The sacred duty of genetic inheritance faces its greatest challenges among those chapters whose gene seed bears the distinctive marks of their primarchs, unique physiologies, and the traumatic events that shaped their legacies. While the Ultramarines and their successors maintain relatively stable genetic patterns that conform closely to Guilliman's original template, other bloodlines carry within their cellular structure the accumulated weight of their gene father's triumphs and tragedies, creating Space Marines whose capabilities and limitations reflect the complex heritage of their origins. The Black Templars represent perhaps the most dramatic departure from standard Codex organization, their rejection of traditional company structure stemming from deeply held beliefs about the nature of Space Marine warfare and their eternal crusade against the Emperor's enemies. Rather than maintaining the prescribed 10 companies of 100 Marines each, the Black Templars organize themselves into crusading companies of varying sizes that can number anywhere from 50 to 300 battle brothers, depending on recruitment success and operational requirements. These formations operate independently across the galaxy, each pursuing its own objectives under the guidance of an Emperor's champion or marshal, who serves as both tactical commander and spiritual leader. The crusading company structure reflects the Black Templars' fundamental philosophy that Space Marines should never remain idle, while enemies of humanity exist anywhere in the galaxy. Each company maintains its own fleet assets and recruitment protocols, allowing them to operate for decades or centuries without requiring support from other chapter elements. The largest crusading companies approach the size of traditional chapters, their massive strength enabling them to prosecute major campaigns against orc empires or heretical cults that would require multiple standard chapters to address effectively. These formations accumulate veterans and equipment over extended periods of successful campaigning, creating elite forces whose combat effectiveness far exceeds their numerical strength. The Black Templars' recruitment practices ignore the Codex's prescribed limitations on chapter strength, as their distributed structure makes accurate census impossible, while their constant warfare creates recruitment opportunities that more static chapters cannot exploit. Crusading companies recruit directly from worlds they liberate during their campaigns, selecting the most promising candidates from populations that have witnessed the Emperor's power firsthand through Space Marine intervention. This recruitment method creates Marines with particularly strong faith and dedication, as they have seen the consequences of heresy and alien influence in their own communities before joining the chapter's ranks. The chapter's rejection of librarians stems from their interpretation of the Emperor's teachings regarding psychic powers and the dangers of warp manipulation. The Black Templars view psykers as inherently corrupting influences that compromise the purity of faith that should guide Space Marine actions, leading them to execute any battle brothers who manifest psychic abilities rather than training them as librarians. This policy creates tactical limitations during operations against demonic entities or Xenos psykers, but the Black Templars compensate through their chaplain's spiritual authority and their extensive use of blessed weapons and sacred relics that provide protection against warp-based attacks. The Space Wolves present different challenges to Codex compliance through their adherence to Fenrisian cultural traditions that predate their integration into the Imperium by thousands of years. Rather than organizing into standard companies, the Space Wolves maintain great companies that reflect the tribal structures of their homeworld, with each formation led by a Wolf Lord who serves as both military commander and cultural patriarch. These great companies vary dramatically in size and composition based on their leaders' preferences and recruitment success, with some numbering fewer than 60 Marines, while others exceed 200 battle brothers. The Great Company structure incorporates specialized roles that have no equivalent in Codex-compliant chapters, reflecting the Space Wolves' unique approach to warfare and their integration of Fenrisian traditions with Space Marine doctrine. Wolf Guards serve as elite veterans who combine the tactical expertise of traditional sergeants with the cultural authority of tribal elders, their leadership extending beyond simple military command to encompass the preservation of chapter traditions and the guidance of younger Marines in matters of honor and conduct. These warriors typically carry weapons and equipment that reflect their personal achievements and cultural heritage, creating a diverse array of combat capabilities within each great company. The Space Wolves recruitment from Fenris creates Marines whose genetic heritage includes specific adaptations to their homeworld's harsh environment and dangerous fauna. The planet's extreme climate and predatory wildlife have shaped the local human population over millennia, creating genetic traits that enhance cold tolerance and predatory instincts while maintaining compatibility with Space Marine gene seed. The resulting Marines possess enhanced senses that exceed standard Astartes capabilities, particularly in areas of hearing and smell that prove invaluable during tracking operations and close combat engagements. The Canis Helix represents a unique genetic modification within Space Wolves' gene seed that enhances their predatory instincts while creating the risk of genetic instability that can manifest as physical mutations or psychological changes. This genetic element, believed to derive from Fenrisian wolf DNA integrated into the original gene seed template, creates Marines with enhanced pack instincts and territorial behavior that influences their tactical preferences and social structures. The Helix's effects vary between individuals, with some Marines developing enhanced physical capabilities, while others experience more subtle changes in behavior and sensory perception. The Curse of the Wolfen represents the most extreme manifestation of Canis Helix instability, transforming affected Marines into bestial creatures, whose enhanced physical capabilities come at the cost of rational thought and tactical discipline. These transformed warriors retain their loyalty to the Emperor and their pack brothers, but their reduced cognitive abilities make them unsuitable for complex operations requiring coordination and planning. The Space Wolves have learned to channel the Wolfen's savage effectiveness during assault operations while maintaining strict control over their deployment to prevent friendly fire incidents or tactical complications. The Blood Angels and their successor chapters face different genetic challenges through their inheritance of Sanguinius's noble but tragically flawed legacy, their gene seed carrying within its structure the psychic imprint of their Primarch's death at Horus's hands during the final battle aboard the Vengeful Spirit. The Red Thirst manifests as an overwhelming craving for blood that can consume a Marine's rational thought during combat, transforming disciplined warriors into frenzied killers whose effectiveness in close combat comes at the cost of tactical coordination and strategic thinking. This genetic flaw affects all Marines carrying Sanguinian gene seed to some degree, requiring constant vigilance and spiritual discipline to prevent complete loss of control. The Black Rage represents a more severe manifestation of the Blood Angel's genetic curse, typically triggered by extreme stress or exposure to psychic trauma that awakens the genetic memories embedded within their gene seed. Marines experiencing the Black Rage relive Sanguinius's final moments in vivid hallucinations that replace their perception of current reality with visions of the Horus Heresy's climactic battle. These warriors see their enemies as Horus himself and their battle brothers as the Primarch's loyal sons, creating a state of enhanced combat effectiveness that inevitably ends in the affected Marine's death. The Death Company represents the Blood Angels' systematic approach to managing Marines who have succumbed to the Black Rage, organizing these doomed warriors into specialized assault units that can channel their suicidal fury toward tactical objectives. Death Company Marines receive black power armor decorated with red crosses that mark them as the Walking Dead, their equipment modified to maximize close combat effectiveness, while accepting that they will not survive their final battle. Chaplains accompany these units to provide spiritual guidance and ensure that their sacrifice serves the chapter's tactical objectives rather than simply satisfying their rage-induced bloodlust. The Blood Angels' recruitment practices require extensive psychological screening to identify candidates whose mental stability can withstand the genetic pressures that their gene seed imposes. The chapter's sanguinary priests, who serve functions similar to apothecaries in other chapters, conduct detailed analysis of potential, recruit psychological profiles and family histories to predict their likelihood of succumbing to the Red Thirst or Black Rage. This screening process eliminates many otherwise suitable candidates, forcing the Blood Angels to maintain larger pools of aspirants than most chapters require for successful recruitment. The Sanguinary Guard represents the Blood Angels' elite formation, composed of veterans whose genetic stability and combat prowess have proven exceptional even by Space Marine standards. These warriors wear golden armor that honors Sanguinius's memory, while carrying artificer weapons and equipment that reflect their status as the chapter's finest warriors. The Sanguinary Guard selection process emphasizes not just combat ability but psychological resilience, as these Marines must serve as exemplars of controlled nobility that can inspire their battle brothers to resist their genetic curses through force of will and dedication to their Primarch's ideals. The Imperial Fists and their successors carry genetic modifications that reflect Rogel Dorn's methodical approach to warfare and his emphasis on defensive operations and siege-breaking capabilities. The 7th Legion's gene seed produces Marines with enhanced pain tolerance and psychological resistance to stress, traits that prove invaluable during the prolonged engagements that characterize siege warfare. These genetic advantages come with corresponding limitations, as Imperial Fists Marines often struggle with the kind of rapid adaptation and tactical flexibility that other chapters develop naturally. The missing Becher's gland and Susan membrane in Imperial Fists' gene seed creates tactical limitations that the chapter compensates through enhanced training and equipment modifications. The absence of the acid-spitting capability requires Imperial Fists Marines to rely more heavily on conventional weapons during close combat, while the lack of suspended animation abilities means that wounded Marines cannot survive as long without medical attention. These limitations have shaped the chapter's tactical doctrine toward methodical operations, where careful planning and overwhelming firepower substitute for the biological advantages that other gene seed lines provide. The Iron Cage incident's aftermath created psychological trauma that affected the Imperial Fists' gene seed through mechanisms that chapter apothecaries still struggle to understand fully. Veterans who survived the siege began experiencing shared nightmares and combat flashbacks that suggested some form of genetic memory transmission through their progenitor glands. Subsequent generations of Imperial Fists Marines have inherited subtle psychological traits that include enhanced stoicism and resistance to fear, but also increased susceptibility to guilt and self-doubt that can compromise decision-making during critical moments. The Crimson Fist's near destruction during the Orc invasion of Rin's world created additional genetic complications, as the chapter's drastically reduced numbers forced them to accelerate recruitment and gene seed implantation procedures beyond recommended safety margins. The resulting Marines showed higher rates of organ rejection and genetic instability, requiring extensive medical intervention and modified training protocols that could accommodate their reduced physical capabilities. The chapter's recovery required centuries of careful genetic management and selective breeding programs that gradually restored their gene seed stability. The Black Templars' distributed structure creates unique challenges for genetic monitoring and quality control, as their scattered crusading companies often operate for decades without contact with chapter medical facilities or mechanicus gene seed analysis stations. This isolation increases the risk of undetected mutations or contamination spreading through company gene seed stocks before corrective measures can be implemented. The chapter compensates through redundant genetic storage systems and the training of company apothecaries in advanced genetic analysis techniques that can identify problems using portable equipment. The Space Wolves' rejection of standard Codex organization extends to their genetic management practices, as they maintain their own traditions for gene seed harvest and implantation that incorporate Fenrisian ritual elements alongside standard medical procedures. The chapter's wolf priests combine the functions of chaplains and apothecaries, their dual training allowing them to address both the spiritual and biological aspects of gene seed management. This integration creates more holistic approaches to genetic stability, but can also introduce complications when ritual requirements conflict with optimal medical procedures. The Blood Angels' genetic curses require specialized storage and handling procedures that prevent the psychological trauma embedded within their gene seed from affecting medical personnel or contaminating other genetic samples. The chapter maintains separate facilities for Red Thirst and Black Rage research, their isolation protocols designed to prevent the spread of genetic memories that might trigger similar conditions in unaffected Marines. The complexity of these procedures requires extensive training for sanguinary priests and creates logistical challenges that other chapters do not face during routine genetic operations. The 10 millennia since the second founding have witnessed the Codex Astartes undergo continuous refinement and adaptation, as the galaxy's threats evolved beyond anything Guilliman could have anticipated during those desperate years following the Horus Heresy. The rigid organizational structure that had emerged from the ashes of the legions proved flexible enough to accommodate new tactical doctrines, while maintaining the fundamental principles that prevented any single chapter from accumulating the kind of power that had made the traitor legions so dangerous. Yet this evolution came neither easily nor uniformly, as different eras brought challenges that tested the Codex's core assumptions about space marine warfare and forced adaptations that sometimes strained the document's original intentions. The Age of Apostasy marked the first major test of the Codex's political safeguards, when Goj Vandar's reign of terror demonstrated how thoroughly corrupted imperial institutions could become without proper oversight. The restriction of chapter strength to 1,000 Marines prevented any single formation from matching the Fraterist Templars' numerical advantage, but it also meant that individual chapters found themselves unable to address the scale of corruption that had infected entire sectors. The response required unprecedented cooperation between multiple chapters, with formations like the Imperial Fists and Fire Hawks coordinating their operations across dozens of worlds to systematically dismantle Vandar's power base, while avoiding the kind of massive military confrontation that might have devastated entire systems. The tactical innovations that emerged during this period reflected the unique challenges of fighting corrupted Imperial forces who possessed intimate knowledge of space marine capabilities and doctrine. Standard assault patterns proved ineffective against enemies who had studied Codex tactics for centuries and developed countermeasures specifically designed to exploit their predictable elements. Chapter masters found themselves forced to develop new approaches that emphasized deception and misdirection rather than the straightforward application of overwhelming force that had characterized most space marine operations since the second founding. The Sebastian Thor's rise to power created additional complications, as loyal Imperial forces struggled to distinguish between legitimate reformers and the heretical elements they sought to overthrow. Space Marine chapters found themselves caught between conflicting Imperial authorities, with some sectors demanding their intervention against Thor's followers, while others requested protection from Vandir's increasingly desperate measures. The Codex's emphasis on loyalty to the Emperor rather than specific imperial institutions provided guidance during these confused times, but individual chapter masters often found themselves making political decisions that went far beyond their intended military role. The resolution of the Age of Apostasy validated many of the Codex's core principles, while revealing areas where its prescriptions required modification. The limitation of chapter strength had prevented any formation from becoming powerful enough to threaten imperial stability, but it had also created coordination challenges when facing threats that required sustained multi-chapter operations. The lessons learned during this period led to the development of more sophisticated inter-chapter communication protocols and the establishment of regional coordination centers that could facilitate cooperation without compromising individual chapter autonomy. The Age of Redemption brought different challenges as the Imperium sought to rebuild from the devastation of the previous era, while facing increasingly aggressive Xenos threats that had exploited human weakness during the civil conflicts. The emergence of new Orc empires in previously pacified sectors required tactical adaptations that addressed the Greenskins' ability to rapidly reproduce and expand their forces beyond anything the original Codex had anticipated. Traditional Space Marine tactics that emphasized precision strikes against command structures proved less effective against enemies whose decentralized leadership could regenerate faster than it could be eliminated. The development of anti-Orc tactics during this period reflected a fundamental shift in Space Marine doctrine from the surgical precision that had characterized much of the Great Crusade toward the sustained attrition warfare that Orc populations demanded. Chapters operating in greenskin-infested sectors developed new approaches that emphasized area denial and resource destruction rather than direct confrontation with Orc forces. The Crimson Fist's campaigns in the Loki sector demonstrated how Space Marine formations could systematically eliminate the industrial base that supported Orc war machines, while avoiding the kind of massive battles that allowed greenskin populations to grow through combat stimulation. These tactical modifications required equipment changes that strained the Codex's standardization principles while addressing the specific requirements of anti-Orc warfare. Flamers and heavy bolters proved more effective against Orc infantry than the precision weapons that standard tactical doctrine emphasized, leading many chapters to modify their squad compositions to include additional close-range firepower. The Salamander's expertise in flame weapons made them particularly valuable during major anti-Orc campaigns, their specialized equipment and tactics serving as templates for other chapters facing similar threats. The coordination between Space Marine chapters and Imperial Guard regiments during large-scale Orc campaigns created new tactical possibilities that the original Codex had not fully explored. The Guard's ability to deploy massive numbers of troops and heavy weapons complemented the Space Marines' precision capabilities, but effective coordination required communication protocols and command structures that bridged the gap between Astartes and mortal military traditions. The development of these joint operation procedures during the Age of Redemption established precedents that would prove crucial during later conflicts against even more dangerous enemies. The time of ending brought threats that challenged every assumption underlying the Codex Astartes, as the galaxy's ancient enemies returned with technologies and capabilities that dwarfed anything the Imperium had faced since the Horus Heresy. The arrival of Hive Fleet Behemoth marked humanity's first encounter with the Tyrannid threat, and the initial responses demonstrated how thoroughly unprepared Space Marine doctrine was for enemies that operated according to biological imperatives rather than recognizable military logic. The Ultramarines' defense of Macragge required tactical innovations that abandoned many Codex principles in favor of desperate expedients that barely prevented the planet's consumption. The Tyrannid threat forced fundamental reconsiderations of Space Marine tactical doctrine because traditional approaches that targeted command structures and supply lines proved meaningless against a hive mind that could instantly adapt to changing circumstances. The Synapse creature system created command redundancies that made precision strikes ineffective, while the Tyranids' biological weapons and armor required different ammunition types and targeting priorities than standard Codex doctrine prescribed. The development of effective anti-Tyranid tactics required extensive experimentation and the acceptance of casualty rates that would have been considered unacceptable during earlier conflicts. The Ultramarines' adaptation to Tyranid warfare during the First Tyrannic War established many of the tactical principles that subsequent chapters would employ against the Great Devourer's later incursions. The emphasis shifted from surgical strikes to sustained firepower, with heavy weapons and area effect munitions proving more effective than the precision weapons that standard doctrine emphasized. The coordination between different squad types became even more crucial as Tyranid bioforms required specific countermeasures that no single unit type could provide effectively. The psychological challenges of fighting Tyranids required modifications to Space Marine training and indoctrination procedures that addressed the unique horror of facing enemies that sought not conquest but complete biological absorption. The sight of consumed worlds, where all organic matter had been stripped away, created psychological trauma that traditional Space Marine conditioning had not anticipated. Chaplains found themselves developing new spiritual frameworks that could help battle brothers maintain their sanity while fighting enemies that represented the ultimate negation of human existence. The emergence of chaos incursions during this period created additional tactical challenges as the traitor legions returned from the Eye of Terror with new capabilities and demonic allies that standard Codex doctrine could not address effectively. The Black Crusades demonstrated how Chaos forces had evolved during their millennia of exile, developing tactics that specifically exploited the organizational limitations that the Codex had imposed on Loyalist chapters. The restriction of chapter strength to 1,000 Marines created vulnerabilities that larger Chaos formations could exploit through sustained attrition campaigns that gradually wore down Loyalist defenses. The response to Chaos incursions required tactical adaptations that balanced the need for effective countermeasures against the risk of corruption that extended exposure to Chaos forces created. The development of specialized anti-demon weapons and tactics required close cooperation with the Ordo Malleus and the Grey Knights, creating joint operation procedures that maintained chapter independence while accessing the specialized knowledge necessary for effective demon fighting. The integration of sanctified weapons and blessed ammunition into standard chapter armories represented a significant departure from the secular approach that had characterized much of the original Codex. The Adeptus Mechanicus played a crucial role in approving and implementing the equipment modifications that these new threats demanded, their authority over technological innovation, creating both opportunities and constraints for tactical adaptation. The Tech Priest's conservative approach to technological change often conflicted with the urgent need for new weapons and equipment that could address evolving threats. The development of new bolt ammunition types designed specifically for anti-Tyranid warfare required extensive testing and ritual approval processes that delayed their deployment, while Space Marine chapters continued to face inadequately equipped enemies. The tension between innovation and tradition became particularly acute when chapters requested modifications to sacred patterns that had remained unchanged since the Great Crusade. The Mechanicus viewed any alteration to established designs as potential heresy against the Omnissiah's will, while Space Marine commanders argued that tactical necessity demanded adaptation to new threats. The resolution of these conflicts typically required extensive negotiation and the development of compromise solutions that preserved the essential characteristics of traditional designs while incorporating necessary improvements. The approval process for new equipment patterns involved complex bureaucratic procedures that could take decades to complete even for minor modifications. Chapter requests for specialized ammunition or equipment modifications required detailed technical specifications and theological justifications that demonstrated how the proposed changes honored the Emperor's will while serving legitimate tactical purposes. The Mechanicus subjected these proposals to extensive testing and analysis that verified both their technical effectiveness and their spiritual purity before granting approval for limited production runs. The development of anti-Tau tactics during the later part of this period created additional challenges as Space Marine doctrine struggled to address enemies whose technological sophistication exceeded Imperial capabilities in many areas. The Tau Empire's advanced targeting systems and sophisticated battlefield coordination created tactical environments where traditional Space Marine advantages in individual combat prowess proved less decisive than usual. The Firecast's disciplined approach to warfare and their integration of advanced technology with sound tactical principles created opponents who could match Space Marine effectiveness through superior equipment rather than individual skill. The adaptation to Tau warfare required modifications to standard assault tactics that accounted for the Xeno's superior range and accuracy advantages. The traditional emphasis on rapid deployment and close combat proved less effective against enemies who could engage Space Marine forces at extreme ranges while maintaining mobility that prevented decisive engagement. The development of effective anti-Tau tactics required greater emphasis on heavy weapons and long-range firepower, creating equipment demands that strained chapter armories while requiring tactical approaches that differed significantly from established doctrine. The coordination challenges created by these diverse threats led to the development of more sophisticated inter-chapter cooperation mechanisms that maintained individual chapter autonomy while enabling effective responses to threats that exceeded any single formation's capabilities. The establishment of regional coordination centers and the development of standardized communication protocols allowed multiple chapters to coordinate their operations without compromising the independence that the Codex had sought to preserve. These innovations represented significant departures from the original Codex's emphasis on chapter self-sufficiency while maintaining its core principle of preventing dangerous concentrations of power. The return of Roboute Guilliman during the 13th Black Crusade created unprecedented opportunities for Codex revision and the integration of new capabilities that had been impossible during the previous 10 millennia. The Primarch's direct authority over Space Marine doctrine eliminated many of the bureaucratic obstacles that had previously prevented rapid adaptation to new threats. His intimate knowledge of the Codex's original intentions allowed him to distinguish between essential principles that required preservation and specific prescriptions that could be modified to address changed circumstances. The introduction of Primaris Space Marines represented the most dramatic modification to Codex doctrine since the Second Founding, as these enhanced warriors required new organizational structures and tactical approaches that integrated their superior capabilities with existing chapter formations. The Primaris Marines' enhanced physiology and advanced equipment created tactical possibilities that the original Codex had never contemplated, while their different training and indoctrination created cultural challenges that required careful management to maintain chapter unity. The integration of Primaris Marines into existing chapter structures required modifications to the traditional company organization that preserved the Codex's essential principles while accommodating the new warriors' different capabilities and equipment requirements. The development of Primaris-specific formations, such as Intercessor Squads and Hellblaster Squads, created new tactical options that complemented traditional Space Marine capabilities while requiring different deployment and support procedures. The coordination between traditional and Primaris Marines demanded new training protocols and command structures that maintained unit effectiveness while managing the cultural differences between the two types of warriors. The expansion of chapter strength beyond the traditional 1,000 Marine limit through Primaris reinforcements created political and logistical challenges that required careful management to prevent the concentration of power that the original Codex had sought to avoid. Guilliman's direct oversight provided the authority necessary to implement these changes while maintaining the safeguards that prevented individual chapters from becoming threats to Imperial stability. The gradual integration of Primaris capabilities into existing tactical doctrine represented a controlled evolution rather than the revolutionary change that might have destabilized the entire Space Marine system. The resurrection of Roboute Guilliman marked the most significant moment in Space Marine history since the Second Founding, as the Primarch who had authored the Codex Astartes returned to find his carefully crafted doctrine both vindicated by 10 millennia of successful implementation and strained by threats he had never anticipated. The circumstances of his awakening during the 13th Black Crusade placed him immediately at the center of the Imperium's greatest crisis since the Horus Heresy, as Abaddon's forces carved a path of destruction across the galaxy, while the Great Rift split reality itself in two. The Primarch's first assessment of Imperial military capabilities revealed both the enduring strength of his organizational principles and the urgent need for adaptation to address warfare on a scale that dwarfed anything the original Codex had contemplated. Guilliman's initial review of Space Marine deployment patterns across the galaxy demonstrated how thoroughly his successors had internalized the Codex's fundamental principles, while adapting its specific prescriptions to local conditions and evolving threats. The 1,000 Marine chapter structure had prevented the kind of catastrophic betrayals that had characterized the Horus Heresy, as no single formation possessed sufficient strength to threaten entire sectors without extensive coordination with other forces. Yet this same limitation had created response delays and coordination challenges when facing threats like Hive Fleet Leviathan or the emergence of the Tau Empire, where the scale of required military intervention exceeded what individual chapters could provide effectively. The Primarch discovered that many chapters had developed tactical innovations that addressed specific enemies or operational environments while maintaining adherence to core Codex principles. The Salamanders had refined their flame weapon techniques to create anti-Tyranid tactics that proved devastatingly effective against swarm organisms, while the Raven Guard had developed stealth insertion methods that could penetrate Tau sensor networks and eliminate fire cast commanders before their advanced technology could coordinate effective responses. These adaptations represented exactly the kind of evolutionary development that Guilliman had intended when he emphasized the importance of tactical flexibility within standardized organizational frameworks. However, the Primarch also identified areas where rigid adherence to Codex prescriptions had created unnecessary limitations that prevented optimal responses to new threats. The traditional emphasis on bolter-armed tactical squads proved less effective against heavily armored Necron constructs than specialized anti-armor weapons, while the standard company organization created deployment bottlenecks when facing the kind of multi-vector attacks that Chaos forces had perfected during their millennia in the Eye of Terror. The original Codex's assumptions about enemy capabilities and tactical approaches required updating to address opponents who had evolved far beyond anything the 30th millennium had produced. The integration of new technologies developed during the 10 millennia since the heresy presented both opportunities and challenges for Codex revision. Advances in power armor design, weapon systems, and communication technology had created capabilities that could enhance Space Marine effectiveness if properly integrated into existing tactical doctrine. The development of improved auto-senses and targeting cogitators allowed for more precise coordination between squad elements, while enhanced Vox systems enabled real-time tactical coordination across much larger areas than the original Codex had assumed possible. The Primarch's collaboration with Belisarius Cawl resulted in the most dramatic expansion of Space Marine capabilities since the original Gene Seed programs, as the Primaris Marine Project introduced enhanced warriors whose superior physiology and advanced equipment required fundamental reconsiderations of tactical doctrine and organizational structure. The Primaris Marines' increased size and strength allowed them to carry heavier weapons and armor than traditional Astartes, while their improved gene seed stability provided resistance to mutation and corruption that addressed long-standing concerns about genetic degradation in some chapter bloodlines. The development of Primaris-specific equipment patterns created new tactical possibilities that the original Codex had never contemplated. Bolt rifles provided superior range and accuracy compared to traditional bolters, their improved targeting systems and enhanced ammunition allowing intercessor squads to engage enemies at distances that had previously required heavy weapons support. Plasma incinerators and assault cannons, scaled for Primaris use, delivered firepower that individual Marines had never been able to wield effectively, creating new approaches to squad-level tactics that emphasized sustained firepower over rapid maneuver. The organizational integration of Primaris Marines into existing chapter structures required careful modification of traditional company compositions to accommodate their different capabilities and equipment requirements. Guilliman developed new formations such as intercessor squads that combine the tactical flexibility of traditional Marines with enhanced firepower and protection, while Hellblaster squads provided specialized anti-armor capabilities that could address heavily protected enemies without requiring Devastator squad support. These new unit types required different deployment procedures and support requirements that necessitated updates to established tactical doctrine. The Indomitus Crusade provided the perfect testing ground for these tactical innovations, as Guilliman led the largest Space Marine deployment since the Great Crusade across a galaxy torn by the Great Rift and threatened by enemies on every front. The Crusade's massive scale required coordination between hundreds of chapters and thousands of individual formations, creating operational challenges that tested every aspect of the revised Codex doctrine. The Primarch's direct command provided the authority necessary to implement rapid tactical adaptations while maintaining the discipline and coordination that such a massive military operation required. The Crusade's early engagements demonstrated how Primaris capabilities could enhance traditional Space Marine tactics when properly integrated with existing formations. At the Plague Wars on Ultramar, mixed formations of traditional and Primaris Marines created tactical synergies that proved devastatingly effective against Death Guard forces, with intercessor squads providing sustained firepower, while traditional assault squads exploited the gaps created by their enhanced Battle Brothers suppressive fire. The coordination between different Marine types required new communication protocols and command procedures, but the results validated Guilliman's approach to evolutionary rather than revolutionary change. The Siege of Vigilus showcased how the revised Codex doctrine could address multi-threat environments where traditional approaches might have proven inadequate. The planet faced simultaneous attacks from Orc forces, Genestealer cults, and Chaos Space Marines, creating tactical complexity that required rapid adaptation and flexible response capabilities. Guilliman's forces employed layered defensive strategies that utilized Primaris heavy weapons to engage Orc armor at long range, while traditional Marines conducted counter-infiltration operations against Genestealer cult cells hidden within the Hive cities. The coordination challenges created by operating across the Great Rift required new approaches to inter-chapter communication and logistics that maintained operational effectiveness despite the warp storms that disrupted traditional supply lines and communication networks. Guilliman established regional coordination centers that could maintain tactical awareness and resource distribution, even when direct communication with Terra became impossible for extended periods. These innovations preserved chapter autonomy while enabling the kind of large-scale coordination that the Indomitus Crusade's scope demanded. The Primarch's direct leadership style during the Crusade demonstrated how the Codex's principles could be applied flexibly without compromising their essential character. Rather than micromanaging individual chapter operations, Guilliman established clear strategic objectives and allowed chapter masters to develop their own tactical approaches within those parameters. This delegation of authority maintained the independence that the Codex had sought to preserve, while ensuring that all formations contributed effectively to the overall campaign objectives. The integration of Imperial Guard regiments and Navy squadrons into Crusade operations required modifications to traditional Space Marine command structures that recognized the different capabilities and limitations of non-Astartes forces. Guilliman developed new joint operation procedures that maximized the effectiveness of combined Imperial forces while maintaining clear command hierarchies that prevented the confusion and coordination failures that had plagued some previous multi-service operations. The Guard's numerical strength and heavy weapons complemented Space Marine precision capabilities, while Navy assets provided the strategic mobility necessary for rapid deployment across multiple theaters. The ongoing debate within the Adeptus Astartes regarding the balance between tradition and adaptation reflected deeper philosophical questions about the nature of Space Marine identity and the role of change in preserving essential characteristics. Conservative elements within many chapters argued that the Codex's original prescriptions represented divinely inspired wisdom that should not be altered regardless of changing circumstances, while progressives maintained that tactical evolution was necessary to maintain effectiveness against increasingly sophisticated enemies. The Primaris integration process became a focal point for these debates as traditional Marines struggled to accept battle brothers who possessed superior physical capabilities and different cultural backgrounds. Some chapters experienced tension between their existing veterans and newly arrived Primaris reinforcements, with both groups questioning whether the other truly embodied the chapter's essential character and traditions. These cultural challenges required careful management through modified training programs and integration ceremonies that emphasized shared loyalty to the Emperor while acknowledging legitimate differences in capability and experience. Chapter masters found themselves navigating complex political and military considerations as they balanced the need for enhanced capabilities against concerns about maintaining their formation's distinctive identities and traditions. The acceptance of Primaris Marines often required modifications to recruitment practices, training procedures, and even fortress monastery layouts that accommodated their different physical requirements and equipment needs. These changes represented significant investments in time and resources, while creating potential sources of internal division if not managed carefully. The theological implications of Primaris enhancement sparked debates within the chaplaincy about whether these modifications represented improvements to the Emperor's original design or dangerous deviations from divine intent. Some chaplains embraced the enhanced Marines as evidence of the Emperor's continued guidance and protection, while others questioned whether artificial improvements to Gene's seed represented hubris that might invite divine retribution. These philosophical divisions required resolution through careful theological analysis and the establishment of new doctrinal frameworks that could accommodate both traditional and enhanced Marines within existing belief systems. The practical challenges of maintaining mixed formations created logistical complications that required modifications to existing supply chains and maintenance procedures. Primaris equipment used different ammunition types and replacement parts than traditional Space Marine gear, creating inventory management challenges that strained chapter resources while requiring new training for tech Marines and support personnel. The coordination between different equipment types during combat operations demanded new tactical procedures that maximized the advantages of each system while minimizing compatibility problems. As the 42nd millennium progressed, the Codex Astartes continued to evolve under Guilliman's direct guidance, incorporating lessons learned from the Indomitus Crusade and subsequent operations, while maintaining the fundamental principles that had preserved the Imperium for 10,000 years. The Primarch's approach emphasized gradual adaptation rather than revolutionary change, ensuring that new capabilities enhanced rather than replaced the tactical wisdom that had proven effective across millennia of warfare. The establishment of new Primaris chapters created opportunities to implement the most advanced organizational and tactical concepts without the cultural constraints that affected existing formations. These chapters could adopt optimal force structures and training procedures from their founding, creating templates that older chapters might eventually emulate as they completed their own integration processes. The unnumbered suns provided a testing ground for new tactical concepts and organizational approaches that could be refined before implementation across the broader Adeptus Astartes. The Codex Astartes stands today as both monument to Guilliman's original vision and testament to the adaptability that has enabled the Space Marines to remain the Imperium's greatest defenders across 10 millennia of constant warfare. The document that began as a response to the Horus Heresy's devastation has evolved into a living framework that can accommodate new threats while preserving the essential principles that prevent any single formation from threatening Imperial stability. As the galaxy enters an age of unprecedented darkness and challenge, the Codex continues to guide the Emperor's Angels of Death in their eternal mission to defend humanity against the horrors that seek to destroy it. The Primarch's return has validated the wisdom of his original creation, while demonstrating that true strength lies not in rigid adherence to unchanging doctrine, but in the ability to adapt and evolve while maintaining core principles and values. The Codex Astartes remains what it has always been, not merely a tactical manual, but the foundation upon which the Imperium's greatest warriors build their eternal crusade in the Emperor's name. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, the Codex endures as both guide and guardian, ensuring that the Space Marines remain forever the bulwark against mankind's extinction.